United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have an agenda here tonight, and it's a printed agenda. There's copies in the back for those of you that don't have it yet. So as it's printed or as amended by the council tonight, we'll follow the agenda, and all necessary and needed actions by the council will be addressed. We can amend that agenda by proper motion for discussion items. We do welcome business from the floor, if anybody has anything that isn't on the agenda here. When you do, if you have comments, come up to the podium, state your name and your address, and then wait to be recognized by the mayor. And then I think you've all signed in. If you do have cell phones, make sure they're turned to silent, please. And with that, I will accept recommendations for approval or amending of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
I would like to move consent agenda items D, F, G, and K to council items H, I, J, and K respectively.
Say that again, please.
D, F, G, and K.
That becomes H-I-J-K. So K stays K.
DFGOK.
Gravel plan, the donation, the contract for animal control, and the auditor update.
Any other changes on the agenda? All right, I will second that motion. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Sheriff's report. Make the commander proud.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. Sergeant Josh Haddon, from the Sheriff's Office, filling in for Commander Whitey. He is unavailable this evening, so. Kind of talked a little bit about Bar None already. As I said, we've had some uptick of calls recent past weeks from there. Heather talked about the riot, 4 individuals caused a ruckus, ended up fleeing from the facility. They were caught a couple miles away. And then actually taken into custody and transported to Lino Lakes Secure Facility. Then on Friday, one of the patrons there stole an employee's car, led into a pursuit down 47, which ended in Nova. He was taken into custody as well. So, a little bit more activity lately from Bar None. So, other than that, so far this month in January, St. Albans has 151 calls for service compared to 101 calls last year. The calls for additional reporting, like the Bar None alarms, animal complaints, so far this year there's been 20 calls for service so far this year as compared to 8 at this time last year. So I don't know what the percent looks like. A couple more animal complaints and a couple more medicals than there was last year. So, other than that, I kind of break down the calls that we're kind of seeing out, and now then really highest numbers are calls that are unknown, so like 911 hang-ups or anonymous calls of suspicious vehicles or whatever it may be, and then if they can't locate the vehicle or it's left or whatever, so don't really know what it is. There's a total of 12 domestics in this city in January. 9 of them were verbal, 3 of them were physical, and then 9 property damage accidents and 6 medicals, and that's pretty much what we see for the most part out and now then on a regular basis, single basis. It's pretty normal for the type of calls we have out here.
Can I ask you, Sergeant, on the domestics, we have one domestic arrest, so of the 9, you were called out and things were resolved and no arrest.
Yeah, so we get there and, 'cause what's dispatched to us and what is reported to us by the, involved parties may not be accurate or whatever, where it may not constitute an actual crime being committed. So then, once we establish if there's elements of the crime, then we'll make an arrest. If the elements of the crime aren't there, then no arrest is made.
So when we get the Friday report from the sheriff's office, each city the sheriff's working in has that, and it's typical, one or multiple cities will have domestic call out. You know, father, son, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And one or both will get arrested. That type of thing would show up on here. If you go out there and it's just like, there's no crime being committed, but everybody just settle down and you just leave, then it doesn't show up on a report like this.
That I do not know. I'd have to ask Commander Heath. I'm not positive about that. What is reported is the amount of calls for service. So anytime a call is generated in your city, it will be on these reports. What the outcome of those calls are not.
Okay. I noticed the same thing in the fire department. Obviously, when there's medicals, you show up typically first, and then the fire department
Yes.
typically right behind you, and eventually an ambulance shows up. So.
Yeah, and usually we're first, but there are times where the fire department will beat us there and whatnot, depending on call load, what we have going on, where the contract car is, or where the cars are at, and what time of day and stuff like that.
Any other things we should know about?
Sunday, and I just heard in passing, got a little bit of detail. Sunday, there's a medical, in your city, and unfortunately, I can find out, so we're unfortunately unaware, there's an elderly gentleman that, went off in the ditch, ended up crawling home. I guess it was right at the end of his driveway or whatnot. Some deputies went and found him. He had a cut on his hand from going in the ditch, so he got him stitched up, but then he was telling that, his car's in the ditch and he'll have to get it out, and, deputies went and found his car. I mean, it wasn't in the ditch, it was buried. So, the deputies pretty much dug him out and, got his car out for him and got it home for him and got him squared away with the medics.
Well, we appreciate that.
Awesome.
Deputies I think the deputies work hard and try to do the best they can out here to provide a service that is second to none.
Well, I think that's one of the things we appreciate, being a small town, and, there's not a lot of communities where that would happen. That would be good luck to you, and call the tow truck.
Yes, correct, unfortunately. That's all I really have for you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, well, if you could extend our appreciation, especially to the deputies that followed through on that and got the car dug out. And just let them know that anybody who's serving now then, I have heard nothing but compliments on the Sheriff's Department service out here. And uniformly, people are glad that we have that contract. And so
It's good to hear.
we're grateful for the men and women serving our communities.
I appreciate that, and I'll definitely pass that along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything from the council for
No,
Sergeant?
thanks for helping out.
Great job.
All right, thank you. All right, floor items. Josh, you didn't sign in on the floor items, did you?
I did not.
And we have no floor items. Did you wish to speak tonight? You're not on the,
He's here for the grading and escrow.
oh, okay.
I guess I don't know if you guys will have questions for me, or,
We'll have more questions for Liz, because we really don't know what our pricing structure, our fee structure is gonna be, so. We may or may not have an answer for you tonight, so we'll see quickly. But, let's go on to the interviews permit for the Botnos. You'll be next. So, we have a request for an interim use permit, extended home occupation, to operate Valor Woodworking and Design. Where's the name come from? Both.
Yeah, you know, I was trying to think of names, and Valor is the one who gets the gold crown, so I like the idea of having a gold crown over the logo. So, gold crown.
That's unique, right?
Valor.
Valar.
Yeah. Everyone looks at it, calls it something different, so.
We weren't targeting being in front of the yellow pages, obviously, so.
Do the yellow pages even exist anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would add to have quadruple A Valar. So.
Not too late.
All right, any questions from the council? Let's get a chance to read through the findings and recommendations.
Mr. Mayor?
Minor Stockman.
Just for Councilmember Greenberg's reference, our report, which was distributed earlier with the planning and zoning packet, and then so typically we'll only include the findings with the council packet, unless you request, if you request anything else, I'd be glad to provide that. So the planning and zoning recommended approval on a vote of 7-0 on this one. So there were no real issues brought up at the planning and zoning meeting.
Yeah, I saw that at the end there, all in favor 7, opposed 0. I mean, that, I have confidence in the planning and zoning that they did their job in due diligence.
Good, yeah, they asked some questions, and this is fairly straightforward for sure.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
I'd like to make a motion to approve an interim use permit allowing for an extended home occupation at 4920 183rd Lane Northwest, PID 3633 25 41 0015.
I'll second that motion. Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
Prosperity to you. And be mindful of your neighbors. That's about the only thing that gets you in trouble at this point. So thank you. All right, now we got the grading and erosion control escrow. So,
You can go, yeah. Oh, you want? You're good, then.
so the question that comes up here that I have, so we've got no,
No specified amount.
and this is necessary, so if there's a building permit being pulled, this is part of the building permit process.
Well, for the bigger projects, I think, yeah, well, to answer your question, generally, yes. If we have a building permit, that's part of the condition of the building permit. And we've had, in many cases, the escrow there to pay for review fees and everything. But as far as the grading, when they want to go ahead, yes, before construction, we need some sort of security to ensure that it gets done properly. We have no, certificate of occupancy or we don't have any leverage So in other words, we can't,
Right, if something doesn't go right, we have nothing that we can do.
right, and as a city, see, you're responsible for the MS4. The MS4 permit, as some of you know, is regulating the stormwater discharge in the city. So the city's responsible for erosion control, you know, proper grading, the stormwater pond construction if he were to abandon the project. Now, in this case, if, let's say he abandons the project before the structures are put up, there's no need for the stormwater pond. So we would just go in, grade the site. We would either seed it or just stabilize it with silt fence or some other means of erosion control.
So in that case, they decided to start grading, abandon the project. If there was a fee here, and we had to go back in and remediate that, whatever it was, we would take that out of the fee.
Right, so we want to be sure we cover ourselves completely in case that we have to go in there. Now, you know, we haven't had any bad situations necessarily to date.
Well, that being said,
But,
back in 2008, 2009, it was happening fairly regularly. Builders came in with projects, we didn't have contractors' agreements, and we had to go settle up with the bank when the builders disappeared and the projects were incomplete, whether it was the roads or the grading or whatever it was. The city got stuck with those costs. And because we didn't have contractors' agreements in place, we absorbed the loss.
right, now, if it's a plat situation, a residential development, then you're gonna have a developer's agreement. So what Bob Rupi, the attorney, would like to do is have a real short grading agreement that would go along with this, security.
And in the literature you have here, you said this is for non-residential properties.
Yeah, we're not considering residential properties right now. Generally those, well, majority of the time, you know, they get in, they dig, they build rather quickly. We're more worried, and that's not involving stormwater ponds and some bigger type, drainage, you know, features.
That has
either.
more to do with your silt fence, so it doesn't get into the city or county ditches
Right.
or into adjoining wetlands.
Right, so that's easily monitored by our building official when he's on site. So, yeah, we're more concerned at this point, well, we say non-residential, so that would be commercial, industrial, or if a church or something like that would go up with some public amenity, those are the ones that we're concerned with right now. So here's what the recommendation is of your city attorney and your city engineer. Instead of going with an actual set amount, they would like to see you say, or set a percentage of the total. So we recommend 125% up to 150% of the total grading cost. So we would ask the contractor or the property owner for an estimate of the work. And in Mr. Peterson's case, we did get a copy of that, and we subtracted anything like fill or building pad preparations. We're just looking at the site grading and the stormwater ponds. So in his case, it was about $18,000 to $20,000. So if we set,
That would be the escrow amount or the amount of the
that was
project?
the amount of his estimate work for the site grading. So if we did 150%, that would be about a $30,000 letter of credit for the Peterson property that the city engineer was recommending. And so because each project differs so much and the site sizes differ so much, it's hard to set an actual amount. And even if it were 1,000 or 3,000, many times that won't cover the cost.
So, and so what you base the 100 to 25 to 150% on is a documented estimate from a contractor.
Right, we basically have to review it case by case. So we would
I was
get
just
it,
thinking of a property recently that we discussed, where you and the building official thought maybe that was a heck of a bargain for that house that was going up, that if that person could build a house for that cheap, we should all buy houses from that person. Can somebody
Oh.
come in with a low estimate here?
oh, I see, well,
You're
no.
basing it on a percentage of a estimated cost.
Well,
Who evaluates whether that's a realistic
Shane,
cost?
the city engineer would look at that, for sure. And then
And say, there's no way you can get this for $3,000.
right, exactly. Or we couldn't, if we had to go in, they'd be evaluating how much it would cost as a city to go in and to do what's on there. So, yeah, if they say it's gotta be slightly higher, then it has to be higher. And then Bob Rupee too, he would look at those letters of credit and bonds. You know, he says cash is number one, of course. The letter of credit is just as good as cash. The last thing that he would accept is probably a bond. It would take him extra time to research it, research the bank. It's something that can be disputed, and he said that there's a certain process that has to be specified within a bond that says how a city or, you know, the other party can collect on it. So our preferred mode is, you know, and usually from a developer is a letter of credit too, so,
I would imagine cash is rare.
yeah, yeah.
And letter of credit, is it undue hardship on the developer if we say it is a letter of credit rather than a bond?
No, absolutely not. It's very much commonplace. And then see, the city engineer will write a letter, let's say you're halfway through, they can reduce that amount. So then he can ask his bank to provide a new letter of credit for a half or a third or whatever, you know. It can kind of follow the progress of the project if it happens to be a really large project. Now, like in Josh's case, sounds like he's gonna be done with most of the grading before he even starts building. So, you know, yes,
If he can get under that snow.
Yeah, we actually have ground flowers on the site right now, so we have about like 10,000 square feet that'll be thawed, which is small, but we'll be able to move those over and keep transitioning through. So we'll be able to get, our building packages in our shelf till June 10th. But, you know, if you guys said, you know, that the length of time was really till the grading was done and you guys could see that it was substantially completed, and you guys would release my cash, you know what I mean? I'd be potentially interested in doing cash. I'd rather do a bond opposed to a letter of credit. From another perspective, because the letter of credit is really cumbersome for banks, and like I talked to my banker about it today, and he's like, well, he's like, you're gonna make me go through loan committee and this and that, and he's like, it's for nothing, you know? Like, they don't have a real great appetite for it, per se. So bonding companies are a little bit more common, easy to work with, but yeah, so I guess that's my 2 cents. Cash is a possibility, but, you know, if you're gonna hold it for a year, I'm not really a fan of that. You know, if you're gonna hold it for 2.5, 3 months, I'm okay with that.
absolutely. I would think that typically, right, after Shane goes out and inspects your work, and if you're half done or if you're 3/4, you know, or done in full, that he can certainly say, go ahead, especially when the building permit takes over and you may have final site grading and black dirt to bring in before you seed and that kind of thing, but that's normal. Just so you know though, like I talked on the phone with Mr. Peterson, Bob Rupee just said it takes him a little longer to review those bonds and ensure that they're, you know, up to standard, I guess, up to his standard. There's a form or a format that he likes that I think he could provide. Otherwise, you know, the banks all have ratings and that kind of thing, so not sure exactly of his whole process. He just indicated it takes a little longer than just looking at the letter of credit.
From my perspective, I'm trying to just move the project, so any hurdles or obstacles, I'm trying to like go straight through them if possible. So, by offering whatever easy solution.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
Question for Planner Stockman, I'm just trying to understand and how this fits in with our ordinance. I heard, do you know the exact square footage, or do you, Mr. Peterson, of how much land
Yeah,
earth we're moving around?
so I think the entire lot itself is like 4.5 acres.
4.5 to 5, yeah.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't really count any of the city land per se, because I can't touch, or not city, sorry. The 1.2 acre parcel that's near the front, I'm not really touching that, other than removing, moving a culvert in the driveway, the existing culvert from the home. I think that's the only thing that's on the scope, that would be, done in that area. So,
True.
So doing math, are we under or over 10,000 square feet?
Oh, we're way over.
yeah, we're way over, I mean,
Way
there's
over.
44,000 square feet per acre,
Okay,
right, so there's 160,000 square feet.
I'm just trying to follow along with our ordinance to
So I'd say,
To dot the
yeah,
T.
roughly 4 times 40,000,
160,000.
yeah, 160,000.
so we're in that over.
Yeah, he's pretty much maxing out what he can on that.
Oh,
Upland, yeah.
completely understand. I'm
Yep.
just-
So the 10,000 is more typical of a home site.
Right,
Right.
right.
Okay, so based on the ordinance, we're in that, we would be looking at getting a land development permit that would be required
Right,
to do this, okay?
So-
So we're in that scenario.
correct. And then if you look on page, let me find the page, within the ordinance itself,
The documented page 97-17, I'm assuming.
yeah, there you go. So that's what allows us to ask for security, is under E there. And.
Right, so basically we've requested, I'm
So-
assuming.
Right. So what we haven't done is we have not, put in our fee schedule, 150% or 125%. I mean, if we wanted to, we could evaluate each on a case by case, but,
I think it's nice for anybody coming into the city to know that they're gonna be treated consistently. Here it is in writing, that's what it is.
yeah, exactly. That's what
It's
I
not the
thought.
vagaries of whatever council sitting there, or what kind of deal we were in that day, or.
So
Yes.
basically, we're in that condition, but there's nothing in our fee schedule to cover our expenses or specifying how much.
How much, right,
would need to be in place
Right.
to address that.
correct.
Okay.
And as a separate issue, because this is upon request and discretion, we probably should need to go back and say, per the fee schedule, here's what we do.
Well, we would put that in our, fee schedule, correct. So we kind of like it to be generic in the ordinance part, but then in the fee schedule can change as we need it to with the.
Yeah, I'm just saying here, upon request and discretion,
Oh, you're directing to the fee schedule.
yeah.
Yes,
Basic-
as outlined in the fee.
And are we basically saying that this would be something that would be, in essence, automatic? Where if you're over 10,000 and you're going to do grading, that you're going to have to do the escrow, so we would be removing the part of the discretion of the city council?
Well, I think we should leave the discretion part in because there might be a case where it could be waived for whatever reason, I don't know.
Like this case?
But, generally speaking, yes, it's going to be a requirement.
You have 4 forward gears, don't you?
Oh, you have a pretty good track record, you know what I mean? You've been doing business for a while now.
We know your face, right?
Our caution is always, the discretion gets us into trouble later because why did you have discretion on this one versus that one? And it'll come back as a precedent was set and then we get in trouble, so.
Well, okay, so.
We've tried to be nice to people that we trust in the past, and next person comes up and says, well, what reason do you have not to trust me? I get the same deal they got, so. It's not that we don't like you or trust you, or,
No, I get it, I understand the rules and whatnot.
I mean, if we're
we
saying,
can't be the hardest city you deal with.
He knows that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan,
I'm just saying, if we're saying, okay, if you wanna build a house, everybody has to have a building permit. If we're saying, okay, if you need to do grading
Grading.
beyond over 10,000 feet, everybody needs to go through this process.
Exactly, just as they have to go through the MS4 permitting, the best management practices, erosion control, all of it, yeah.
So as a council, we can direct you to tweak this
Yes,
in the ordinance to be consistent from one project to the next. We're not gonna bog this down tonight with that. The problem we have here tonight is we don't have a fee schedule established. And so going back to the 125 or the 150, I think we should pick one rather than, again, be discretionary, this one's this one's that.
I agree, yep.
Looking at what the neighboring communities do, closest we would have with Ramsey, they have an administration fee and a percent of project cost.
Right,
Columbus has an administration fee and a per lot amount and staff time to review.
right,
Elk River has no administration fee, but they have a what looks like probably administration fee per acreage. I'm gonna guess their
right,
grading escrow is really an administration. If it's less than an acre, it's $200. If it's 1 to 5, it's $500. That's probably for the review and administrative part of that.
yeah,
And then there's a $3,000 per lot to verify as-built grading plan.
right, and I'm thinking that was like exactly what you said for review and approval. The as-built, yeah, a lot of cities require an as-built survey. And that's what that's referring to, but we're not to that point yet. So, yeah, I feel like, and so did Attorney Rupie, that the surrounding cities are, maybe not quite up to the standard he would like to see, which is Ramsey's standard of 150% of project cost. He just doesn't want to see you get burned if we do have some sort of a bad situation.
Okay, so looking at Ramsey, they've got an administration fee as well. In the case of this where staff has to go out and verify, if everything is done according to plan, would he get 150%, get the entire fee back? Where does the administration cost come into something like this? Because in a building permit,
Well, part of it too depends on if it's somebody like Mr. Peterson where he had an interim use permit, some of that inspection fee that you would have from, the engineer could be charged that way. But you could also have a separate escrow specifically for the city consultant review or staff time.
because somebody's gonna review it and somebody's gonna go out and look at it.
Right, it has to
So
be
if-
the
if
engineer.
Somebody from the engineering firm goes out there, we're gonna pay them.
Oh,
Somebody's
yeah,
gonna pay them.
absolutely. So I agree, I think there should be,
So we either have to designate a portion of that escrow is gonna go to cover administration fees. And I would want Mr. Peterson to know what that's gonna be ahead of time, so that, as a developer, I would be saying, wow, you could eat up all my fees with 60 visits to the site. I mean, it has to be something reasonable too, to say, what's a reasonable administrative fee for something like this? How much time to review the plans and how much on-site activity are we talking about?
well, I don't know, I mean, it's almost impossible, because in his case, the IUP covered the review of his plans. So Shane had his review is done, Shane does not have to look at his plans anymore. So all Shane
And
has to
there's a
do,
fee within that for Shane that's gonna come out of his IUP permit.
right, yes, so, but if somebody just came in that didn't need a special permit or was not constructing a building, then the grading review would come out of something else, So we do have our site plan review, see, that application could be something we could use that does have that $1,000 escrow. And then, so we can use that, and we could certainly tweak that a little to say site plan / grading plan review,
See, that makes sense to me, because then you've got some place that the developer knows it's limited to something less than this typically.
Right,
And, I mean, I still would like to see the city be able to give as concrete a number to anybody that's developing as we can, so that, I just hate surprises when we go to close out the escrow and say, oh, it's all gone.
Right.
And what did we do with that? But I think we do need to have something in there for review and on-site.
Now, the only other thing we could do
confirmation.
is we have this grading application that was included in your packet, and that could be tweaked to, you know, have a heading like our typical applications do, and then we could have the fee and the escrow indicated on here. So it would kind of be one and the same. Because I'd hate to give someone this erosion and sediment control application, and then they have a separate site plan review application. And then they've got the letter of credit or the bond, and, you know, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of a lot, but,
I was just reading, I think it was in the Minneapolis paper this last week, about how difficult it's getting for people to build in the suburban areas because of all the fees and the red tape that they go through. So I would like to make this as reasonable, as you say, consolidate the forms, make it as easy as possible for somebody who's got a big project going on to get through this.
right.
And understand the fee process, so it's consistent from one project to the next. Combine forms where possible, but make sure that in a case like this, the city's getting reimbursed for the investment that we're putting into their project.
I agree.
I have a quick question. You guys reviewed the term IUP. Where do I have an IUP? I thought I had a CUP.
Well, CUP, IUP, sorry, we have both. Yours was, yes, multiple buildings on a single lot, so it probably was a CUP, because that runs with the land. Once the buildings are there, they're not going anywhere,
Sure, okay.
yeah, so, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just like, I don't remember an IUP, but sure.
I almost got it by You're sharp. No, that's a good point. In the case where there is a what's considered a permanent structure, it would be a CUP.
And is this something that you guys are really like come to a conclusion on tonight? Just so that, because my intent, and I'm sorry that I'm always pushy, but I'm just trying to like keep things moving. So is it something that Liz or Mr. Mayor that will have some sort of determination on tonight, so I know which way to proceed?
You know, when I was going through my packet previous to the meeting tonight, I would have said no. But having had our questions answered tonight, it's up to the council, but I would say it's possible, yes. The question that I had coming in was, I've got fee structures from surrounding communities, I don't have any context to put it in. And so once Planner Stockman recommended a number and the justification of why that number makes sense, then I have something to support. So, and knowing that this isn't a one-time fix to get you going, but it gives direction to the staff to say, now we gotta go back and fix our documents accordingly, establishing a fee structure tonight, we put it in our fee schedule, we amend our documents and our permitting forms so that going forward, this is seamless. So you're helping us get us over that hump here. So.
Yeah, sounds good.
And just so you know, Mr. Mayor, the resolution is not necessary. I prepared it, Bob said, no, we don't need that, the attorney, so I just said, fine, we won't.
You
I
can
won't
let the
charge
attorney
you
know,
for it.
but yeah, we like resolutions because it makes it easier to track.
I know it does, so all we're doing with the resolution then, just to be clear, is establishing the amount for Mr. Peterson. And then we will come back next month with the actual ordinance change with our fee schedule and that amount, because that requires a hearing.
So you'll take the ordinance change, the permit consolidation, the
Yep.
process start to finish,
Show it
and
all to
and
you, so
the
it's all,
formal change in the fee structure.
yes,
But going forward tonight, if the council so chooses, we could pick 150%
right,
of the determined project cost.
correct.
And establish that tonight, Mr. Peterson can get going.
Correct.
Other questions from the council?
That seems fair to me.
Can we talk about, in my situation, if we were gonna do cash, like how long you hold it for, or things like that, from the time that it was like substantial completion?
Well, you've got heaters going on the land right now,
Yeah.
so you'll probably be done with this by April.
I would say like end of April, because I think, road restrictions and stuff like that will, well, I don't know, it's hard to say, but I mean, I'm shooting for end of April.
Road restrictions might not be till May, the way winter's
Yeah,
going.
no, who knows, right?
But it could, the groundhog didn't see a shadow, so. We're just about done with winter here, we just gotta get through one more week, so. I can't say for sure, but I would guess May. What do you think, Liz?
Oh, I don't think it's unreasonable. It just is a matter of him requesting a site inspection, Shane going out looking at it, and then he writes a letter, and then it can be reduced or part of it returned.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
so would it be safe to say we could hold the money in escrow for 120 days, but Mr. Peterson could request a site review anytime before that, and if everything is done, then the escrow money could be released?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know that it even,
Or 90, I don't know.
I don't know,
I-
I don't know that we need a time period, because it's just a matter of how far along he is in completion,
If he's
Okay.
completed, he can request it any time. If he's not complete, it's not gonna matter, it's his cash he's tying up. So he's gonna be motivated to get it done. We will respond as soon as he gets it done.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
Shane will be out there within a couple of days, I would imagine.
Oh,
Worst case.
from the time that I request yeah. I mean, you can just use the terminology substantial completion, right? From that point, you have like, I don't know, a week or something like that, or whatever, 5 business days, however you wanna word it.
Yeah, substantial completion, if the engineer comes out and agrees, we release the money. Again, I'm trying to make it easy for people to work with us, so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll talk to the city attorney about, what his typical grading agreement says, and then I'll also include that with your packet next month.
Anything else from the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
so I'd make a motion to approve to set the amount for Mr. Peterson's escrow at 150% of the project cost to be reviewed by city staff upon substantial completion, and on that approval that the escrow be refunded. If I got that right.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And you want to do it just for this case, and you're going to clean up the ordinance going forward? With that understanding, I would
I
second
was
that.
going to make another motion after this one was done, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the understanding is to get us off the dime for Mr.
This
Peterson
is just
here.
for this one specific,
And
this
then
motion
we'll-
is for
then we'll
this
direct staff.
specific occurrence, yes.
So I will second that, with that understanding. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
I'd also make a second motion to direct staff, specifically Planner Stockman, to amend our current ordinance to update the fee schedule as appropriate, including some sort of administrative fee as well as a project cost of 150% of using the escrow amount as 150% of the project cost.
As the basis, okay, and then reference that in the text of the stormwater ordinance. Item E, let's see, 9-4-3E, will amend the security section of that ordinance.
And then with that, you'll consolidate the permit. forms.
Permits, example of a grading agreement, Yes.
So, Councilmember Bryan, to include that as part of your
Yes.
motion. All right. Do I have a second for that?
A second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Can I ask a quick question about Mr. Brian's, motion? He had mentioned project costs, but I don't know what that project cost would be. If you're gonna hold me to that, my project cost is obviously higher than the amount of money that it's gonna take to grade for retention pond and things like that.
I think the intention, Councilmember Bryan, correct me, but the intention was the grading and retention pond costs, not
Site
the
cost.
total project cost, the site cost,
Okay, good.
site preparation.
For the grading plan. Yeah.
Yep, great, thank you.
Okay, great.
All right,
Good.
thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, for sure, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan,
motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
you had pulled out amendments. I did have, I should have mentioned this. I did have a question on the claims. So if I could just ask a couple of questions on the claims, and then we can go ahead with the amendment or with the motion.
So you second for discussion or amend it?
I will second it for discussion. So just, I see a check in here for the skid steer. Do we have our skid steer? So the other one's been turned in and, all right, they like it?
They love it.
Good. A question on the mediation and restorative services,
Dan had that question too.
1238.
I called them about it because I've never seen it. I didn't see it in the system at all. I called the person about it. She said it was Anoka County mediation, something or other, that the city has been part of for years. And they just changed their name.
I don't, yeah, I remember them asking for monies. Mediation services asking for monies. I didn't remember us approving any.
They sent us a bill, so I just assumed it
Yeah,
was something that had been
I'd
happening.
like to see where we approved that, I guess. So I'd like to hold that
Is this
one.
a contract or something, or something that we're part of already with the county and we just have to get paid for it?
I know they send something each year to say, here's how the money would go and here's how we'd allocate Nowlan's portion of it. But I don't know that, I don't recall that we have a contract with them or that we've actually authorized a payment.
I don't know.
It could be one of those where they're saying, we presume you're gonna wanna be part of this, but
So just hold on to it?
I'd like to research it. I'd like to have you research it to see. If it's something we've contracted and we just miss it, maybe it's something Corey was just doing and we just didn't know, but.
I can look in the contract book.
But I'd like to hold out 1, 2, 3, 8 until we get that clarified.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan,
I would amend my motion pulling claim number 1238 from the claims.
okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockton.
do you have any recollection of when that discussion may have taken place? So if she has to look in the minutes or anything?
There's a claims folder, or a contract folder that I can look at, but I don't know what their name used to be.
It's always been, I think it might have been Anoka County Mediation Services. I think the restorative is new.
Okay.
Oh,
The mediation services has been there.
okay.
Because I know that we always give a donation to the women's shelter.
Alexandra House, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought of too.
Is that the same thing?
No, this is different.
I'm new to this.
This is one where the mediation services
Yeah.
sends out here's you know, we'd like to bill everybody in the county, and here's what we think you're using for these services, and therefore your portion would be this. But I don't know we've ever agreed to pay that. It's just kind of like, we presume that you're using this much because you got this many people in now, then, and therefore,
That's what she said, it was, the amount was determined based on our, a dollar per,
Capita or
projected,
population.
yeah, projected typical usage.
yeah, that's what she told me.
So, and maybe we've got a contractual agreement somewhere, but I just don't recall it.
So-
I remember them asking for money, but I just don't remember us agreeing to pay it.
So likely it would have been then about a year ago then, or a little
Okay.
less, I'm guessing. If it
Yeah,
were
it's-
in the,
I know like Alexandra House, they do theirs a year in advance.
oh, okay.
Oh, 2017, 2018.
The other note on 1229, Mike Pofel, says the audit's complete, so we're paying him his last payment here. Is he really complete? You and I talked about this first thing today.
He's considering it complete. If he has to continue, then he's not charging the city for it.
Okay. So if this whole AEM thing where they're saying it's 60 days before they can close the books, if he's got to do something more after that, he's considering he's already, he's not charging extra.
That's the last I heard from him. I
Okay.
don't know. Absolutely.
If things get a little confusing, make sure he has my number.
Yeah, things get confusing.
If they get more confusing. I mean, I don't want you sitting there trying to answer for the council or AEM at this point.
Yeah.
I don't want, if AEM and Mike aren't communicating effectively, then I will interject myself and another council member in that to try and clear this up. Because we've got to have our financial people all on the same page.
But Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
is there issues with that specific amount too, or that one's?
Well,
okay
the
for now,
question
or-
was, the auditor has said the audit's complete.
Right,
AEM is saying they really can't close the audit numbers until 60 days have passed, because they got to make sure that all 2018 bills have been processed. So they have a window, and the county keeps that open until the end of February. So once the county has given all the tax records over to, in this case, AEM is saying, give us the tax records, we'll pass them on to the auditor. So AEM is saying, we haven't given you the tax records from the county. Mike's saying, I already got them from the county. But their contention is, until 60 days have gone by, you can't know that you've closed all the books. So they're thinking that this can't be done until March, which is why Mike waits till April to give his audit presentation. Because he's doing the same thing, but in a different way. He's saying, I'm assuming everything's in. If something comes in, I'll amend my audit before I give it to the council. AM is saying, don't complete your audit until you know everything's in. So because of that, Mike's saying, I'm done with my work. Here's my final bill. If there's something more, it's going to be at no charge,
okay,
is what I'm
Yep.
understanding.
that's just clear.
And we don't anticipate anything more at this point, but if AEM finds a bill that wasn't closed out, Mike will have to adjust. So that number won't change. And if it does, please bring it to our attention. And then we had a question, it looks like at this point, AEM has a bill for January and February, so it's $24.20 a month,
Yes,
every month?
every month.
Okay. We'll have that discussion too. All right,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
I just wanted to make a comment and thank Mr. Olson for coming tonight. As in years past, he's going to be maintaining the baseball field in our parks and use the fields. I just wanted to thank him for providing some free entertainment for Nowthen residents throughout the summer. It's nice to, even on the hottest of hot days, to still go out and catch a ball game, and just for something to do on a summer afternoon. So.
Can you bring us a championship?
Yeah, that might be tough.
All right, a good afternoon of ball. I would also like to consider for the council to ask the council to consider that the schedule be made available on the city website and on our electronic sign, so that people do know that we have a town team and its activities going on down there. So I think if that's all right with the council, we'd have staff include that as an item on our website and on the electronic board out here. So I'll move accordingly.
You already have a motion on the floor, I believe.
Oh, for the consent? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sorry. All right, as far as the rest of the consent agenda, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have the road improvement.
Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
did you want to make your motion?
Oh, yes, I would move that the, Nowthen Knights schedule, as games come up, would be posted on the, schedule would be posted on the city website, and the weekly schedules would be posted on the electronic board.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
would you be amenable to amending your motion to include the schedule in the city newsletter?
Yes.
I will second that.
All right, any other discussion?
Sounds great.
All right, seeing and hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Green paper, is that your, a second?
Dan.
There you go. Now you can go play in the snow.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sir.
I've talked to Liz about this before. It's, we have on the building materials on my building, there's an option to go galvalume on the roof. And my roof is actually a pitch of, in 40 feet, it goes up a half an inch for every foot. So if you look, like a lot of typical homes would have like a 4 to a 6/12 pitch, and mine's a half inch per foot. So the roof, for the most part, wouldn't be visible. It is it's a slope roof, but it's an incredibly gradual slope. And I understand that there's a
Prohibition on galvanized
yeah,
metal.
correct. Yep. And my material, can't make this up, but it's called Galvalume, not galvanized. I did get a sample of it. I apologize I didn't bring it tonight. It does, resemble galvanized. I thought that the reason why you guys outlawed galvanized was because of the quality of the material, right? So that's my question to you, is the real meaning behind galvanized, or the prohibition of the galvanized material, because of the quality, or is it because of the idea of the look of it? And mine's gonna be on the roof, so, and again, because of my pitch being only a half inch per foot, right? So in 10 feet, it would go, maybe a better example, in 12 feet, it'd go up 3 inches. You know what I mean? So.
Almost
not-
flat, yeah.
It's incredibly flat. It's a standing seam roof.
Maybe 6 inches, 12 feet.
Will be, yeah, so, oh yeah, half, sorry, I was using quarter. Yeah, anyways, but yeah, it's very insignificant.
Much more dramatic.
Yeah. It's very insignificant, and the reason why I'm.
I don't think it's the material, I always think it was the appearance. The
Yeah.
material itself, not the not the quality of the material galvanized versus galvalume,
Yeah,
but I think it has to do with actually the metal roofing.
yeah.
I don't know if you know, Liz.
Yeah, I think it was more the intent and the galvanized, you know, it's more associated with farm, buildings and, you know, Quonset type huts. And maybe it's because galvanized doesn't necessarily have a finish, it's unpainted
Yeah.
versus painted. I don't know if,
I
you know.
can bring a sample in and, you guys can maybe look at it. It's a $28,000, difference in price for, you know, a material that's not really gonna be seen from my perspective, so.
Is yours painted?
So it has a finish, and the finish is called galvalume. So
It's
technically,
a silver appearance.
It looks like gray.
yeah, it's more of like a variegated look, right? It's not like one consistent color. I don't want, I mean, I'm not saying it looks like.
Yeah, it kind of has a,
Has like slightly different tones.
Like galvanized material would. I mean, if you have galvanized aluminum,
Yeah,
or
yeah. I mean,
galvanized tin in its bare state, it does have a mottled look to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
so when, pardon me, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to understand whether it was like the look, but, you know, is it, you know, I hate doing it, it's a case, I don't know. My perspective, it's a case by case,
The alternatives to the galvalume would be what? $28,000 more would be.
yeah, for white.
The painted white
Essentially.
is what he had,
Yeah,
because he has white trim, right?
yep, white trim, blue doors, and some blue accents.
And so what, the regulation is not galvanized or galvalume. It's basically it's a
Unapproved,
treated material, so it doesn't rust.
right.
But we're saying we don't want it to look like a barn roof or a Quonset hut roof that,
Right, so I told him, no, I was not gonna make that call, and that if he wanted it changed, that he needed to come back to you again. Because the way I was interpreting it, it was not allowed. And now granted, it didn't specify whether it was a look or, you know, material, but I know it was referencing
typically, if you've seen the older metal buildings, the galvanized roofs, they start to rust. They
Yeah.
look next door at our shed.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with this also, it's like, is it the type of material because of the known defects that it has over time, right? Is that the idea behind the prohibition of that type of material, or is it just, you know, again, the color or the aesthetics of it? So,
Why don't you bring in a sample with what the manufacturer warranty is on it?
sure. So I'm good with that.
Because I think part of it probably is, you know, it's the look, so it doesn't look like we have next door here, or a typical
Yeah,
barn roof that after a while just starts rusting.
yeah,
And if you could, ask them for pictures of it installed.
yeah.
And if you have to drive to it possibly to take a photo somewhere, you know, it might be helpful.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
I also know that from a neighbor's tin roof, the sun can, 10 acres away, can blind me. I don't know if that's part of it too. It's a,
Yeah, I think this is, in my opinion, you know, I have a sample that's like this big, so it's not incredibly large, but it does seem muted. It doesn't seem like incredibly reflective, because again, it's a paint coating on it. So I guess that's where I was going with it, like, you know, it's actually called galvalume, right, not galvanized. Your ordinance says galvanized, so I could make the argument that it's a technicality and.
why don't you bring in the sample, bring us in the warranty.
Try to find some photos and we'll go from
Yep.
there.
And Liz, can we ask you to see if you can research why we might have done that, when it was determined? Is
Sure.
that something that,
I certainly can try to do that.
is that
would've
something
been-
Dan might have put into our ordinances, or?
Yeah, that's pretty.
Otherwise, if Dan didn't do it when he codified, then it would be something the town board did.
I'll see what was in prior to that, but I know it's in our, you know, typical, I'm guessing it was around 2009 or 10 when he.
See if you can find out what the logic was behind it,
Okay,
and Ms. Peterson, if you would bring in what you can on it.
Is there a way to, I have like 2 weeks approximately, so is there a way to communicate this information, or does it have to be done via city council, or how would I approach this to expedite?
Oh, well, you have a month if you wanna just bring it directly back to council. I don't know that there's any reason to.
You're saying you have 2 weeks to make a decision?
Essentially, yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because it's, you know, it's basically I sent a wire today or whatever, it's in product, or it's starting production, so.
Technically, it should be decided by the council. You have two options, wait a month, or pay for a special meeting. We have that option if a resident wants to cover the cost of a special meeting, which is much more reasonable now since the council doesn't get paid anything extra for extra meetings. But we do have to pay staff time, so there is a minimum fee for a special meeting.
Approximately how much is a special meeting? $500?
500 or 750? Or somewhere between 500 and 1,000.
I'm gonna say it's less than 1,000.
Mr. Peterson?
Yep.
Do they also have galvanized?
No, they don't have that as an option. This company does anyway.
I would say the galvanized is where the problem
I'd
is.
like, you know, if he's getting, trying to get the specifications on the Galvalume, it'd be interesting to see what the galvanized would be, and if they're the same.
I
Assume
think,
it's nearly the same product.
I think that the galvanized, the problem there is it will tend to rust depending on where you put the holes in and stuff. I would think the aluminum would tend not to so much,
Mr. Mayor,
just from my experience. Councilmember Bryant,
special meeting fee is $500.
Sounds good.
Question, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
I'm just thinking galvanized, is it the
No, not
Ruffles roof?
corrugated.
It'd just be it's flat.
Well, they have it would be a typical roof for a shed, you know, which has the drain, you know, they bend it.
The overlap.
What do you call that? Channels, yeah, channels.
So it's not corrugated per se, but it's gonna overlap where your seams overlap,
Where your seams are.
I'm assuming.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch that. It's gonna overlap where, it's a standing seam roof or whatever, so they have basically essentially there's no visible seam, right? 'Cause I think they just put I think there's like a trim piece that connects two pieces essentially together. Are you in sheet metal or metal fab or?
Used to be in the air conditioning business.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time visualizing.
Well, he'll get that to us, because
Yeah.
we can't speculate here. Planner Stockman, you had something else you want to say?
I just was wondering if, Josh, is there any difference in the weight of the metal, the, you know, quality of it?
Yeah, I assume that from my understanding, and I'll get more information, but it's the same material as everything else, it just has a different coating on it, right?
It's a finish,
Yeah,
finish,
right.
yeah, with a clear coat of some kind.
So that finish ends up being a $28,000 difference.
To
that
upgrade
and
beyond
painting.
that, to get to anything else.
To
'Cause
do
that's just
white,
their standard,
yeah.
right?
So the metal's the same, but the coating makes a $28,000 difference.
I really, to be honest, I think that they put you in a situation where it's like, everyone upgrades, right? Cause from the idea that, they only give you one color, you know what I mean? So there's no personalization. It's like a limited options deal where it's like an easy upgrade for them. You know what I mean? It's probably the same, I mean, I'll find out.
Get the specs, and if you were to ask for a special meeting, there's no guarantee we say yes.
Yep, I understand that. How long would it take to start, to get that process to, happen?
Minimum is 3 days, we have to post it,
Okay,
and then it would be on the availability of the council members.
sure. And then you just want me to cater it so you guys don't get paid or since you guys don't get paid any extra?
Bringing dinner?
Yeah,
Is that what
dinner
you're
and
offering?
wine, please.
I was gonna say, everybody except for Joel can make a midday meeting.
Planner Stockman, so if we were to agree to this, would you put in a variance to allow it? I don't understand what a variance is, but I'm kinda asking.
No,
Would we, to allow that, would we put in some special wording?
no, it wouldn't be a variance. I wouldn't support that at least. We typically haven't in the past, you know, done a lot of variances, so what I'm thinking is we either prove that it's different than galvanized, or we change our ordinance to allow that type of a finish.
So we have to come to an understanding, and that's why I say that it's incumbent on Mr. Peterson to help us understand what's the difference between this product and galvanized, to Planner Stockman, figure out what our problem is with galvanized, try and put it together so we say, okay, this doesn't give us the same problem, that the reason we excluded galvanized was this, and this product doesn't meet that same criteria. Therefore, we have reason to allow this and not that. If it's the same, basically the same product as galvanized, and there's a good reason we didn't use galvanized, then we probably don't want to do this either. So we need some more facts so we can understand it. So, and we're not gonna do it tonight, because we,
Yeah. No, that's fine, if you just want to glance, I can get a better picture of it, but I have something on my phone.
but what I would have you do is get it to us in a hard copy so that, or to an electronic copy,
Sure.
so that staff can send it out to the council members, so we can do our due diligence on it. And then by that time, we'll have something from Planner Stockman on why the prohibition on galvanized and how this is distinguished from galvanized, if it is at all. So what distinguishes it, so that it gives us logic that we can not set a negative precedent with. Because we always have to be careful when we do it for one person, we in effect change the ordinance. Because everybody else is going to come back with the same, I want the Josh Peterson rule. We may not be able to keep up with all those after a while, so.
The Josh Peterson rule?
No, we appreciate your thoroughness as a businessman and your desire to do business in our community, so.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you guys, I think we kind of know how to work together at this point, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to push things that aren't, realistic at the same time, so.
Well, and then we've had this conversation before. It's also realistic to say, I know what I want, and give me a good reason why not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a good balance. So sometimes we have to stop and think ourselves, why did we make that decision?
Yeah.
And does it make sense going forward?
Yeah.
If it does, we should be able to defend it. If it doesn't, we should be able to amend it. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Bryan.
if I may also request that Planner Stockman, could you send out either the ordinance number so I can find it or the actual ordinance?
Oh, sure, I'll copy the, how
And
it
then
reads.
when you find out your logic behind that, get that to the council as well.
Sure thing.
Yeah, maybe I can find a piece of actual galvanized material to include with it, and then, you can just do a side-by-side comparison of the physical sample as well.
That would be nice, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know that the, if it's the chemical properties or the structural properties that the manufacturers say distinguish them.
Yeah.
And then see if that aligns with why we made the decision. Maybe we went in the ordinance just because people didn't like the look. But I will say that if it's historical, it's probably because many of the galvanized roofs on old buildings rust pretty bad. And they look,
Yeah, and that's fair.
it looks horrible after a while. So.
If that's the reality of it, and this product is the same as galvanized, I'm on the same page. Like, I'm not looking to have an asset that looks poorly maintained or,
Yep.
erodes over time, so I'm with you.
And what was the company name again for,
It's Trachetete.
oh yeah, TR,
Trachete, I think.
okay. Thank you.
All right, well, you guys have a good night.
Thank you.
See ya.
Ellen, when you come back from your conference, we'll expect to be amazed by all the things you've learned. Could you do us a favor in that? Just give us a brief synopsis of the highlights of what you learned. And how humorous some of the entertainment actually ends. They make it sound pretty good. All right, so we're going to go to the road improvements. All right, 2019 road improvement project update. Does the council have any question on engineers Nelson's letter?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
so right now, as I'm reading this, we're going to be pushed back a little bit. If what would have been a meeting tonight to to approve the plans and specs, that's in essence going to be pushed because they're not done yet. The earliest would be the next council meeting, unless we wanted to have another special meeting after that. I would say, if that's the case, let's just plan on doing that at the March meeting, and if Shane isn't able to,
If the snowplows keep breaking off all their markers next 2 weeks, and he gets delayed, then we'll have a special meeting.
but right now we can plan on doing everything at the next council meeting to approve to move the project along.
Okay?
That's my understanding of the letter, just
Yep.
to clarify.
So if the engineering firm can get their work done and prepare the documents accordingly, we will take it up as an item on our next city council meeting in March,
And
which would be March 12th.
yes, and I'm not sure if we would I'm just being safe that if Shane could have someone represent their firm, I think that would be beneficial, just,
Yes, we
Off the top
definitely
of
need a
my head.
representative from Shane's firm. He can send somebody, he said, so. Shane will be on vacation or in March then. So if you will request of Shane a representative. And then a backup date would be the road and bridge date of March 19th, which would be appropriate.
mhm.
Unless we just want to do that and have Shane be there.
Is a week, I guess the question would be, is a week going to continue to push things back?
Well, my concern is depending what ends up on the March agenda, will we give it enough time? We got five projects,
Have to do it all in that.
and trying to pack that in with a council meeting. Maybe we just go for the 19th. That way Shane's there, it's a road and bridge night anyway. And we can address all of them at that night instead of trying to fit 5 of them into a regular council meeting as well. And 1 week isn't going to substantially change the project, I don't think. It would give us a better opportunity to evaluate what he's presenting.
In theory, then, they would be going, if they're approved, they'd be going out for bid, and we'd be opening them at the April meeting instead of the March meeting.
Or a special meeting in April.
Okay, that works.
All right?
So we don't need to ask them.
So no need, we will tell Shane that we're looking at March 19th and schedule a meeting for March 19th, Tuesday, March 19th.
So this is a joint meeting with Road and Bridge now?
We'd just be
No, it's just
canceling.
just council. Road and Bridge is free to be there. If they have something for their own meeting, they can meet in the basement. But I think they'd want to be here for this meeting. This is more important than anything else Road and Bridge has on their agenda right now,
Right, Joel?
in my opinion. All right, so, a motion to,
Well, and
to call an assessment hearing for these projects, Tuesday, March 19th, 7:00 PM in the City Hall.
is it an assessment hearing or?
That's what it says here. It says we are targeting the regular March meeting to consider approving the plans and specs
authorizing.
I'm sorry. So we're approving the plans and specs and authorizing advertisement for bids, and then calling for an assessment hearing. So we'll set an assessment hearing at that meeting.
Right.
So we'll approve the plans and specs and schedule a assessment hearing at the March 19th meeting.
Okay, I have a question. Is that March 19th meeting in addition to the March 12th meeting?
Yes, March 12th is our normal council meeting.
So
This is going to be specifically for the road project plans and specs and authorizing of an advertisement of bids.
Because I think March 19th is the first night of my conference that we just approved for me to go to.
No, the 20th. It is?
It's the Tuesday.
No, because that's a Tuesday.
She has a
Yeah.
class on Tuesday.
March
Class on
19th.
Tuesday.
Oh.
March 19th is Tuesday.
Unless we have someone hired by then.
Well, in the past, we've just recorded it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the past, we've had the attorney also take minutes. He's going to be there probably for that, right? Yeah, Bob should be there for that, so. So we'll make accommodations. Unless you want to run back.
There's a big meeting that night for newbies, and so should ask Bob to be here for that and 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So moved.
All right, second. Any other discussion?
March 19th,
Mm-hmm.
7 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
Town Hall. Got it.
All right. City Administrator update.
Mr. Mayor, there's a
Oh, sorry.
motion on the floor.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. City Administrator update. Councilmember Bryan and I have been having discussion with others, including the head of the Clerks Association here in the state. And after our evaluation of the interviews we've had, and your numbers were a little wrong there, Ellen, but we were given 8 people to interview. Some of them were certified clerks and understood working as a clerk as well as administrator, or we've been calling it administrative clerk. But in realizing through the interviews that Councilmember Bryan and I have conducted, and then subsequently going back through the other 14 or what was it, 17 applicants that had been given letters that they hadn't been approved, or had been rejected, I guess. A city our size realistically needs a clerk. We're not ready for a administrator with a master's degree in administration. We're looking for somebody who can work, because we don't have staff to delegate things to, and this is what, in talking with Clerks Association, they thought it was very appropriate that a clerk treasurer could handle the responsibilities of the city, and that we were overreaching by going to a administrator with a master's degree. Because of the situation where whoever has this position has to be a working operative. When Helen's busy or Helen's not available, they've got her on the front desk, got to be able to do the permits, but they also have the authority to direct staff, be responsible for all staff and contracted staff. And so, working with the Clerks Association, what we are proposing is that we rewrite the posting, identifying clearly what the job description and with an appropriate cover letter to identify what we're looking for in a clerk treasurer, the full scope of responsibilities, but that we have a working clerk with a working counsel. Many administrators are accustomed to delegating to the abundant staff they have and not really getting in and doing the work themselves. And many of the more established administrators are not desirous of working with a working council. They're used to established cities where the council just does what the staff recommends. You know, we're the second youngest city in the state. We're still more akin to a township than a full-blown city. And the fact that we don't have an abundance of staff to delegate things to, we're proposing that we repost within the week here to the Clerks Association, to the League of Minnesota Cities, and any other sites that we find appropriate to request a clerk treasurer to fill this position. And in the meanwhile, I'm working with the next item here, I'm working with the attorney, Bob Rupi, and the league to identify an interim administrative person. We have some recently retired administrators that might fill in while we're looking for clerk treasurer. So, being there's only 3 of us here to make the decision, I will put it to a motion that we redirect our efforts rather than a more expensive, more experienced administrator with a master's degree in administration as a minimum, that we redirect our efforts to find a person that can fill in as a clerk treasurer. If they aren't currently certified as a clerk, that they would get certification within a defined period of time. But that we would redirect our efforts accordingly and repost. So I will move accordingly.
Second.
Any other discussion or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting when we were doing the phone reviews that, many cities have different titles doing different things. There isn't a set, this is what this person with this title and does as a role, so that it seems that you can, fine tune based on your job description, the tasks at hand. And I think we can, with some small revisions to the current job description, we should still be able to find the right person for now that.
Yeah, one of the things we found when we talked with people in our search and talked with people in authoritative positions in other cities is that Mr. Darris significantly tied our hands and our wallets by 2 things. 1, requiring the master's degree, and 2, interjecting the planner portion of it. And by doing that, it changes the scope of our search completely. If you're going to hold out for a master's and planning experience, it limits the number of people who qualify, and it significantly raises the price of the position. And that's what we've been told by more people, and was confirmed with the Clerks Association when we talked with them recently, that will change your pay structure completely.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
it also seems that someone who may have those qualifications may have a certain expectations of what their normal tasks and duties would be in a city situation, and they might be slightly disappointed by accepting this position. So I agree with your move by changing it to a clerk treasurer. It'd be more of the kind of fit that would be here at Alvin.
And with the appropriate cover letter and job responsibilities going out with that, it'll make it clear. Councilmember Bryan and I, that's one of the things we emphasized in our phone interviews. And that's how we found out. Some people are like, no, I wouldn't be happy doing that. This is the job I want. There were a couple in there that said, you know, I'm a certified clerk already. I'm doing administration work right now, but I'm quite comfortable behind the desk, out in front, wherever it is. A couple of them said, I'll get behind the snowplow. But I think we've also talked about, I don't think it's, Mr. Darris considered he wanted the planning portion of it in there because he just didn't feel there was enough work to keep one person busy. Looking at what Ellen's been doing, looking at the number of things that we want to do as a city that haven't been done yet, Councilmember Bryan and I don't necessarily agree that that's realistic. So adding the plan of responsibilities on there, I think would tax them. I think there's some things they could do. I think the code compliance could be something that could easily come their way. And some of the clerical things, if you've got the right staff here, might be able to come off your shoulders. But I think combining that right now is not a good direction for a city to go. And we're finding that with the people that we've talked to. And we're trying to make it, you know, we don't want to surprise anybody coming in here saying, this isn't what I was looking for. So in the same way I interview at work, I do what I can to get them running to their cars right away. Because I don't want them being told it's going to be so lovely here and have them come in and be surprised it's not exactly what they thought. I want to give them the worst case scenario right now. If they still think they'd like to try it, then they're only going to be more pleased when they come in. But if we oversell it and they come in and say, this isn't what I was thinking at all, we got a problem. And I think just with what Ellen's been doing, to have an appropriate person in that administrative role, getting things done that, quite frankly, we've never even done as a city. There's a lot of things we haven't done to build community here. You know, my son recently moved into Minnetonka, and the welcome wagon packet that he got from the local businesses and the community itself, you know, things like that, welcoming people to the community. We say people are welcome here, but we don't do anything about it. We don't introduce them to city functions or where they can get city information or, you know, how they fit into the community. What is our neighboring community? What's the chamber role in our communities? There's a lot of things that we've been getting by doing what's required, but we haven't really reached out into building a good community. And the concern is if you get somebody who's too concerned about delegating duties and then spending all their time planning the future of the city, when we haven't really become a unified community yet. I think we're more appropriate having somebody work hand in hand with Ellen to do that type of thing than just start dumping more work on Ellen because they're trying to do all these administrative things. And I think that was something that we saw in our public works. Mr. Darris and our public works department weren't seeing eye to eye on things. And it became more delegation instead of collaboration. I liked one of the candidates who said, if you need me to jump into a snowplow, I'll do that. That's the kind of attitude I want. Maybe I don't want the clerk to necessarily jump in a snowplow, but to ride along in a snowplow, yeah. To go out there and find out what's going on, you know, to go out and see what's actually happening within the city. I would like the clerk to actually step foot in our recycling building and, you know, when the county people are here, or when the staff goes in and says we can't even open the door because of the cardboard, I would want them to be firsthand at that, not just say, that's your job, do something about it. So we're finding through our interviews that we've had, through our experiences that we've had this last fall, and through our conversations with the Clerks Association, the League of Minnesota Cities, and officials from other cities, it's helped us refine what we're looking for. So I think we're looking for a working partner, not a boss. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockton.
I commend you and the whole group for thinking and taking the time to rethink it as the fit yeah, the fit is so important in the small office setting, and, I think that's the way it felt, like, with the boss just delegating versus helping, so there's a big difference. Just wondering about your thought on timing.
I'm hoping to hear back on, well, two things. On the timing on the rewriting and the reposting, I want to have that within the week. And so that's the intention right now that council member Brian and I had talked about. If this was amenable to the council, since there's only 3 of us here, two of us already had the notion, we just needed a third. But we'd like to do that within the week. And then I do have the attorney investigating some potential interim. If this takes any longer, then we might have an interim for a short period of time as well. Obviously, with Ellen having personal vacation and working needs outside the office, I appreciate your willingness to help out. Building officials department willing to help out. And I think we'll have some other people that can step in here, but I'd like to have, if we can't find something quickly in the clerk area, that we'll have an interim to help out in the meantime.
Okay.
We're finding that the interims, our best bets are recently retired,
Mhm.
and we just have to find one that's willing to drive to where we're at, that fits what we're doing, so.
Okay,
But we have one we're doing some background on right now, so.
so you're gonna allow 30 days again for applications? Or not that long?
Potentially.
Okay.
Again, that's something we'll confirm with the Clerks Association. If they think we can do it in less than that, we'll do it in less than that.
Okay.
Because again, with what Bob was looking for with the masters and with the planning background,
Mhm.
that was gonna be a little harder to get a pool together.
Right.
And what we did find with that is a lot of them came in at the last minute. Because those first 2.5 weeks, we had nothing. We had one.
Maybe one, yeah.
We had one, and then they were begging 2 others. Bob begged one and decided not to, and we had nothing to begin with. And Bob told us they'll come in at the last minute. So if we give them a month and wait 3 weeks for it to come in, or we give them 2 weeks and see who's really ready.
Right, right.
So, but we'll confirm that with the Clerks Association to see that we aren't shortchanging anybody. But if you don't know, and if it takes you 30 days to figure out you want to apply for it,
Right.
you don't want it very badly. So I would lean towards shorter rather than longer.
Mhm.
So maybe we compromise at 3 weeks.
Okay.
But if the Clerks Association thinks a 2-week notice is sufficient, well, we would jump on that too. So if we could have some interviews going on early March.
Right. Just thinking of spring and how busy it gets. So.
All right, so that covered the city administrator, interim administrator.
I think there's, did we vote on that? Yeah.
No, we didn't vote.
We did not.
We did not.
First and second.
A motion, a second, so all those in favor of redirecting our efforts to a clerk treasurer from a degreed administrator?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Ellen has a request in here for a temporary assistant, office assistant. Councilmember Bryan.
I'm just was wondering if it'd be possible to get some more details about a proposal. Something that I'm assuming we would have to post with a, is the, do we need a different job description than what we have out there for an administrative assistant? Or is there anything above and beyond that we need? And depending on if we had, you know, would this be necessary if we had an interim clerk / administrator in the office? I also know we've had some residents volunteer their time in the past. And after some conversations with them, they've said that they'd be interested in continuing to help out as needed, if needed.
Ellen, do you know from our previous, when we had Leanne here and Diane here, do we have a job descriptions for the types of things they were doing? Nothing that you've seen?
Not that I've seen. I just thought we'd go like to temp agency or something and find somebody that was looking for work and just, it doesn't have to be a formal job application you have to post and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just need one.
I work with a
database
couple of,
mostly.
I work with half a dozen temp agencies right now through my business. In fact, when we were looking before, it was one of those businesses that actually had come through with somebody. Typically, they want full-time, though sometimes there are those that want a few days a week. Look at the hours you're talking about here, it's 3 to 4 days a week.
Every day, 5 hours a day or something,
Yeah.
you know, short days.
Something else to consider too is some of that scanning that could be done.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that I could do stuff with, but if it's gonna take too long to get it done, then forget it, I'll just do it myself. Because I need the database for the reason I'm doing the database is for the newsletter. And the newsletter needs to be out end of April.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
if I may ask for the database for the newsletter, what specifically are you looking for?
I was just creating a database of all the residents' addresses.
Okay,
Because right now, all the addresses are on the spreadsheet. That's all, when we send it out for the mailings, it's on a spreadsheet.
are you referring to the labels sheet or the actual spreadsheet that I typed up in an actual Excel file that we could use for a mail merge?
I have no idea what you're
Okay.
talking about.
I sent that to, I did that last year, where I took the labels list and put it into an actual spreadsheet so that we could do a mail merge. And use it for whatever, so that was delivered.
It's in an Excel spreadsheet?
Mhm.
I'll have to look and see if I can find that.
If that's what you're referring to do a mail, to do a mail merge, so that you can print the
Wonder if I
addresses on
can
it?
take that spreadsheet and put it into the database, or do you have to enter one at a time in the
You-
database?
You're referring to an Access database? You should be able to export from Excel right into that.
So. if it's
Is that
simple-
something that you could assist with?
Mhm. I mean, if that's what it was, because that was the intent, that it was a lot easier to have it in a spreadsheet so that we could sort it by zip code or even street or house number or whatever, and then maintain that,
Well,
at least for the time
All right, so
being.
you've got a series of things that you need help with that are, some of these are projects, some of these are ongoing. So like the first one would be a project, the newsletter would be a project, the recording and scanning, those types of things would be ongoing types of things. And you'd be content with either a contracted clerical on a part-time basis or a seasonal clerical, similar to, as you said, Joe has with Steve and Randy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
All right. Let me take a look at what you've given me before and what you've got here and come up with a proposal for the council to, because we'll have to decide on dollars and hours. And if you've got other things to add to the list of projects or ongoing types of things that you're looking for, keep adding to the list.
Okay.
I could help you with the kinds of things that Diane
Okay.
and
I
Leanne
know
did.
Diane did the septics and the,
We're a year behind on septics.
There's a lot of organization type stuff, yeah, that we could,
Got the year-end stuff organized from last year and things like that, but. Putsy stuff.
all right. Transferring 2 CDs. Sorry for anybody listening online, I didn't mean to do that. So, we have one that's coming up next week. $132,443. If we left it where it is, it would renew for 18 months. If we were to run that over to a 4M account for 18 months, we'd be looking at on today's quote, 18 months, 547 days, 2.78% interest, would be netting $5,643 on 135.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
if I may, I'm trying just, and maybe I missed it, but are these for the same fund? Like they're both for parks, or they're just in general? Or are they separate? As I'm understanding it, some of the 4M fund was saying that you needed 250,000.
Up to that. Email, I think he said he'd have up to 250,000.
And that's for the top 10 certificates of deposit that says on here where it says the 250, that's up to?
So what he was referring to was this.
Yeah, Dan's referring to this one here.
I'm referring to.
Is that a minimum or a maximum?
I don't know. I just know that he got the best quote today, this morning. And these were also from this morning, but this is from our representative from 4M. And he said this is the best quote as of this morning for CDs at the amount that we're looking at, up to 250,000.
So, per Dan's question, we have 2 CDs.
I don't know what they're for, what funds. I know one of them is parks, but I don't know. I'm not that familiar with. It's new to me.
And one has to wait anyway, because it doesn't mature until sometime before March.
Yeah, March 20th.
So I'm assuming that we can't pull the one early, so we have to be doing 2 separate transactions anyway.
So the question is, we could pull the 1 CD back and just put it into our account at Pine River.
Mhm.
And when the second one matures in March, we can take that one, 111.6, And why did I see 132 on something?
Yep, on the cover page. From Ham Lake Deposits is 132, 433, 54.
That must be with interest, because I got 130 here, so. All right, so we had 132 and 111, whatever the interest is, we could find out what so the current investments, we got 3 CDs out there. Got a 12-month Pine River. And so the Pine River is 112.9. So we got 113 there, and we've got 132 there. So we got 245,000. Take another 5,000 in there, you can get the 250,000 rate for 270 days. So you could get almost the equivalent, instead of locking it up for 18 months, you could get it for 270 days. So 3/4 of a year.
So, right, 9 months, how much interest would you be losing on the month? I have to do the math, but I can't believe it would be.
Well,
that
the
much.
270 days is 250 to 270. If we lock it up for a year, you're 265 to 280, so it'd be similar.
Right, yep,
And so if we didn't have this one locked up for 18 months, yes, we'd lose a little bit of interest in the bank while we're waiting for a month.
but you could just put it, you wouldn't even have to leave it with Pine River, you could just put it in the 4M.
Yeah.
So you'd get 2.25-ish, so you'd be losing out on 0.5% amortized out for the entire year.
18 months.
And then move them together in
And
March.
then, assuming they're both for parks, and it's not a problem if,
How do we know?
Well, but even if, we can take a look at how to designate them, but we can still have, we still have our records, how much is in parks.
in each account, okay.
Yeah,
As long
it's
as it
just,
doesn't-
they could be in the same investment fund, but this portion of it is parks and this much is,
As long as that part from the accounting side is gonna be okay, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Then I would think,
kind of like Bob said when he was here, and we were talking about dedicating some of our monies to this capital fund. It's all in an investment fund with 4M.
mhm,
It's just, this much of it goes this capital account, this much goes this capital account. So in the same way, there's a capital fund out there for parks. It's got this much money in it. It's pooled with this much money in a 4M account. So we take it out now, get it out of this before it locks up for another 18 months.
mhm.
Put it in the 4M, which is still a good return. And then in a month, decide if we want to, we can talk to Kent and say, is this a minimum of 250? Well, we got 250 we could put in for 9 months or for 12 months. And not be totally locked up and get a good rate of return, because we're likely going to get about the same here. If we go up for a year, 18 months on this top 10 certificate is 260 to 285.
Similar to the quote one.
The quote was 278.
And if I may, this might not be the same, where as long as we're under the understanding, the 2.78% might not be there in a month.
Correct. Might be more, might be less.
Mhm.
Yeah, the interest rates are going up. And if you believe that what the Fed's saying out there, it's probably going to go up again yet this year. But right now, the recommendation would be to get it out of Falcon, put it in the 4M, and then make a decision on what's the best plan, and through the 4M investment opportunities. I didn't get clarification from Kent. I'm going to guess that this is a minimum 250. It says
I
that.
don't know.
I've never seen a maximum before. And looking at the rate of return,
Would have to be.
I'm guessing it's a minimum.
Corey's actually our contact.
Corey is?
Ken's the one that print, he sends it out every day.
Okay. Yeah, so if you'd ask Corey about the top 10 certificates. And then, for right now though, let's get the one out of Falcon and put it into 4M. The more aggressive of the 4M. Because it's not money we need right away.
Right, we're getting about another % just to put in the 4M-ish. And then
And you put it in the 4M plus, and you're getting another 0.2%, 0.4%. But the 4M plus, we don't need it to be that liquid, we just need it out in a month.
And then we add, then we can discuss it again in March if we want to continue on that, or do we want to?
And we'll have information on whether a top 10 certificate makes. And we'll know our need for the funds too, so.
I believe that this is, just because this came separate from this, I don't know why. He said that they deal with, Corey said that they deal with a lot of different banks. And this changes every day too. But, the one from PM, the 4M fund thing.
Yeah.
PMA is 4M, that's
Yeah.
what produces our statements every month too. But, so this was the quote that he gave us this morning for the best bank at this time. So all of these that are on the 4M fund, I imagine, are also, surveying all the banks that they invest in, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
But I would say that the 4M fund has different things that you can invest in, CDs being one of them.
right,
Again, it all came down to how liquid do you need it, because the CD's locking it down.
yeah.
If we're saying we might be looking at putting it into a CD in a month, if we need to hit that 250,000 minimum, we wouldn't necessarily be doing that now.
But if we put it in the 7-day effective,
Where we can theoretically get it again in 30 days and move it into a longer term locked up CD, then we could do that. so
gives us a
that
chance to evaluate our options.
Right, yep.
Okay.
But it keeps it, because right now, if it were to roll over in Falcon, currently in Falcon, what is our rate?
1.25, 1.24.
And at Pine River, it's 1.4. So I don't know what the new rate would be at Falcon, but it would lock it up for 18 months. If we move it over to 7-day effective 4M plus fund, it's 2.24. So we'd still be earning reasonable interest and give us flexibility to decide on long-term when the next one comes up in March. Gives us time to do our homework and make a recommendation at the March meeting. Make sense, Alan?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant?
make a motion to move the account that is at the Falcon National Bank, once the CD matures on February 18th, and move that into the 4M fund where it can, depending on if liquid we need to get at, or 4M plus if we can get it out in 30 days, to move it into the 4M fund, and then when the other CD from Pine River matures next month, we can reevaluate the best place to move those funds, and we may need to add a little bit to it if we need to meet a $250,000 minimum.
I'd like to second that, but I didn't quite follow all of it.
To move everything to the 4M
So I'm
fund.
understanding the principle, I'll second that we're taking the money out of Falcon
Yes,
and moving it to 4M.
yes.
And Ellen, you will check at 4M plus 7-day effective, how liquid that is, how much time we need to move that out. Didn't
I
you?
don't know what the difference with the 7-day effective and everything, but Corey told me that the difference between 4M and 4M plus is that, I think 4M, yeah, it has one of them is a 14-day waiting period.
So we're okay with the 14 days, because we're looking at a month, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you also said when you took the money out to put in the checking account at Pine River, you took it out of the 4M liquid because it was slightly lower interest
Yes.
rate. So in our 4M plus right now, did you give us that? The 4M plus right now,
It's with the financials. Actually, no, it was in a separate email.
anyway, we do have, I think, 100,000 in there. There's a significant amount of it.
It's, seems like there's,
Okay.
400,000 in the 4M plus one,
Okay.
and less than that. I don't remember.
All right, so at this point, we'll take the Falcon out. This is your motion, Dan, and put it in the 4M, 7-day effective, 4M plus. And then you'll find out from Corey about the top 10 certificate, 250,000 designation. So I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? And then you put on the agenda next month the Pine River CD. Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
there was some, after we got the last review on the computers, I just had some questions, and so I was working with Ellen, who also referred me to talk to Randy and Chris over at Arby's. And the PCs that we have are currently running Windows 7. Microsoft ended regular support for Windows 7 in January 2015, but they extended it through the end of January 2020. With that in mind, if there were any critical updates after January, we would not have any support for issues with the operating system. After that discussion with Arby's, our computers will handle Windows 10. And so I also talked to Chief Koner about the PC at the fire station, that computer also would be able to support Windows 10. There's money in the current administration, Public Works, as well as the fire administration funds for computers and office equipment. So I would like to make a motion to update 6 computers, Joe's, Ellen's, the building inspector computer, the other office PC, the laptop, as well as the fire station PC for up to Windows 10, 6 computers. The rate is, the software is free currently. Arby's estimated it would take roughly an hour for installation, barring any unforeseen issues. So the cost for those 6 computers would be approximately $654. If there are issues with that installation, more time may be necessary. So I'd make a motion to upgrade those 6 PCs to Windows 10 with the funds coming out of their respective budgets.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
Arby's recommend, or at least brought up the discussion to look at replacing those computers. As I understand it, we have no current issues with PCs. I was planning on taking a look and we didn't spend any money on computer equipment for last year, so there's some possibilities for making sure we have enough money, if a computer did go down, that we could replace it. But I think right now, with everything going, I don't necessarily see a need where we have to replace the computers, but we can at least upgrade to Windows 10 so that if we have just under a year to make sure we get all the kinks worked out.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to upgrade to Windows 10?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Planner Stockman, comprehensive planning.
You have before you the introduction and the community perspectives section of the comprehensive plan draft. From now until the time we submit this to Met Council, I guess the goal is to sort of take a section a month and just go over it with a fine tooth comb and make sure there's nothing we want changed. We knew when drafting it that it was very, very similar to our previous comp plan.
Do we have a, how similar, how it's compared?
We don't, but we could get that.
And I think that would be helpful.
You know, basically the community perspectives, well, starting with the introduction, really the only thing I changed there was putting in the new regional planning designation maps as they require, and then put in a section regarding the regional issues that we went through this past year with the diversified rural designation. Since the previous comp plan was done in 2009 or 10, we had adopted the frontage road plan, which was originally the 8 quadrants, and then we had a comprehensive plan amendment that removed one of those quadrants.
Remember how urgent that was?
How what?
Urgent that was?
Yes, I know. But Mr., oh gosh, what's his name, that owns the lot here that they bought from A and B, you know, traded.
Yep.
He had, he almost died. He had terrible heart issues this past year, which delayed him a year, so.
So real quickly, if we're gonna go through line by line, on the first page, page 1, introduction, there's 4 items. Comprehensive land use plan, parks and trail system plan, and a water management plan. Should the water management plan still be 2009?
It has to be updated, but we are waiting on the Upper Rum River. So they.
Joel? Get on it. All right, so that one's waiting.
So that plan was submitted for review.
2009?
The
updated.
the updated comp plan from the watershed.
Oh, the watershed submitted their, right?
What I would like you to do is maybe then highlight things that still are gonna change on here
Okay.
before we submit it finally,
Okay,
so it doesn't look like an oversight.
okay.
2019 comprehensive land use plans in their parks and trails. You've been working on that, Judy?
Well, right, I mean, we included in our comp plan is gonna be that map, that official
Yeah,
park and trail map.
but it's gonna have to be updated rather than
So,
2011.
well, right, but it doesn't have to be done before this is necessarily. I mean, again, the
No,
power.
I just want, when we put this to bed, we don't go back and say, oh, we never did, we forgot to get to that, so.
Okay, okay. Well, these two really, I mean, this is insignificant in the fact that we're noting what's included in here. So any update, maybe what the thing to do is just to note that, and any future updates are part of
Yeah.
this, you know?
Or current, or something that says,
Right,
you know, we have a last update in 2011, and, but there is a current plan that, but just something that marks that we're not still operating off a 2009 water management plan and a 2040 update, 2019 update.
okay.
Then at the last sentence of that second paragraph there, it says, the 2030 and beyond, should that be 2040 and beyond?
Yeah. Yeah, probably so. Yeah, that should be 2040.
And have we updated this since 1999? Didn't we do this in 2000?
We did, yeah, we did this in 2009, the last one,
So in the next paragraph, then, we've got again, the last two sentences. Comprehensive plan was first adopted in 1980, when we were a rural township, followed by comprehensive plans in 93, and most recently 99. It actually should say 93, 99, and most recently 2009.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Joel, you get the next page.
Well, the next page looks pretty.
Pretty. I have a meeting, by the way, on Thursday with our council representative down at their office. And so I'm expecting that when he sees we have the draft done, and then we're gonna go through any details that he wants included. So I'm hoping after that point that they'll release the last half of the monies for us. So, from the grant.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
question for Planner Stockman. So this is supposed to be the most current map?
Yeah, it still is. We have to put that in there.
Okay, but I'm just trying to understand, if we don't have diversified rural anymore, shouldn't there be no blue? Am I missing something?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is I have to talk to him about that, because this is their most current. And
Okay,
they're aware, obviously, that we don't have
okay,
to
so this isn't,
follow
so
that.
this, as we understand it, this map is out of date, or will be.
Yes,
But this is this is the last one that they gave us, so we have to include it.
we have to include it, so unless they're gonna update it, right, and, which is why I followed this with a discussion of how this, how its removal occurred.
Sure.
But yeah, that is a question for Met Council.
Okay.
I guess the important thing to note too is on page 3 is how that all started with their notifying us that we were no longer part of that wastewater system plan. We were,
Because my eyes are, that page 3 kind of fuzzy.
it is fuzzy. And I apologize, but I'll ask them if there's any sort of original that we can stick in here, because this is just cut and pasted off their website. had Bob Rupi review the historic regional issues section on page 5, and so he authorized how it was written.
And the dates on page 4, that's for the final, thanks.
Right, we'll put in there after we adopt. I think in the community perspective section, starting on page 7, I'd like to take some of these land use issues which are more prevalent or kind of maybe represent our overall goals more and put those first. The rural character and the, you know, residential transitioning type RRA discussion, and then, I don't know, if we really need all these details regarding soils, wetlands, shorelands, erosion, you know, or if it should just be more of a generalized, you know, maybe 5 to 7 bullets of what we really want to see in now then for the next 10 years, you know? This kind of itemizes out the different sections of the plan in a sort of a summary or a preface to what's in it.
So one of the things that we've been telling the residents and telling our planning and zoning in particular is the comprehensive plan is the pinnacle of our organizational documents.
Right,
So everything comes down from this.
right.
So when we look at our ordinances, we gotta go back and say, how does that guided by our comprehensive plan? So one of the things I had done with the previous plan, you can see all my flags here. You know, there's certain things I think we need to accentuate. So to your point, prioritizing these, you know, on page 7, one of the things I noticed was vegetation. Due to the natural characteristics and agricultural history of Now Then, there are few significant tree massings within the community. Those that do exist should be preserved as a natural resource amenity that enhances Now Then's rural character. So those types of statements in here that talk about the enhancement of rural character, the historic, you know, those are the guiding principles that we want to capture and retain from this version to our coming version. So that we can accentuate that and remind people of that when we're doing ordinances and zoning regulations and variances. How does that support the comprehensive plan?
Right.
And if we're, you know, I was thinking, it's turning out to be a nice neighborhood 20-some years later, but when the farmland just south of me, southwest of me, was first sold to a developer, they just came in with bulldozers, pushed all the trees into a pile, burned them all off so they didn't have to deal with that when building the houses. And now that 20 years later, the trees are starting to come up, it's starting to look like a neighborhood again.
Right.
But it just, the stench from those trees, just seeing those trees burn now, they'd probably chip them and sell the chips to somebody. But the idea that they just came in and bulldozed everything rather than, remember years ago when I first moved here, Burnsville had a tree ordinance that just said, you're building a house, you build around the trees, you don't take down the trees for your house. We may not be that restrictive, but we do have, if you look at some of the nicer communities, I go to parts of Elk River and the wooded areas that they've got the homes built in, where the homes are tucked into the trees instead of denuding the countryside and putting up homes and hoping trees grow up later.
Right.
So our ordinances and our zoning regulations should reflect things like this in our comp plan. And I think 2 things, we need to prioritize them, and then we need to accentuate them. These are the type of things we probably should come back and put in bold. and then
Right.
make sure that that our ordinances support the comp plan. And I think that it's imperative that whoever we have on the planning and zoning understands this document
Yep.
before they go and change ordinances or before they go and approve variances. Or willy-nilly say, let's just change that because it'll help somebody sell something.
Right,
So I've got a number of these things here, so I think that to your point of, do we lose something by having all of this? I don't know. You know, the bullet points of soils, wetlands, shorelands, you know, it has a point. There's 12 lakes within now then subject to protection from encroachment by intensive development. Subject to protection from encroachment by whom? As the city now then is required to adopt local shoreline management ordinances consistent with Minnesota rules regulating land use in these sensitive areas. So we have setback regulations,
well, state, yeah,
so
DNR,
the state and the DNR, and, you know, we have the floodplain, you know, the 100-year flood, you know, so we have certain regulations. It'd be really nice to be able to tie our ordinances back to this, you know, with the technology that's available today. You could link our ordinances back to this, which, you know, typically in state documents, they'll call out the statute. You know, this statement supports statute whatever. So if you want to see why that ordinance or why that document says what it says, you go back to the statute that says, the state says we have to do this. Well, the state and the DNR said we have to protect these shorelands from encroachment by intensive development. So if somebody comes in and wants to do that, our ordinance doesn't allow that because it goes back to our comp plan, which goes back to state statute. But I think we need to start making those connections so that, one, we abide by our documented procedures. Two, if we ever get called into court, we have a trace.
right. Absolutely. Well, so then to that point, obviously preserving rural character is probably our number one
Yes.
goal. And our natural environment would be right up there with that. You know, I think the attraction of commercial industrial development and maybe highlighting that niche we've found.
I do, you know, I would like to, not tonight, but revisit the industrial plan along 47. I do think where it's heavily residential and unlikely to ever be industrial. And realistically, the question came up, is the portion that we currently declared industrial on the west side of 47 contiguous?
Right. It's really not.
And I think we need to declare that because what's going to happen is development on 205th, where the gentleman wanted to, came in with his concept plan for 5 acres and then said, I'm just going to go 2.5 and
Right.
claim that my property across the road is contiguous.
Mm-hmm.
So if we set precedent over there that's contiguous, we're going to have problems elsewhere.
Right. Absolutely.
And if Ramsey goes and develops along our border, I'm going to say it's contiguous to their industrial, and so I think we need to revisit that and make it literally contiguous and declare that residential that is residential,
Mm-hmm.
much to Mr. Peterson's chagrin.
Right. So I mean, we've talked about some of the transportation needs. you know, one of the things that we've brought up in the last several years is, and Shane's highlighted a few times, are the, you know, limited connections north, south, east, west, when we have the number of wetlands that we do. So through streets are something to talk about also. Now, I don't know that that's, you know, a number one goal, but something related to transportation. But something like, you know, the beautification of Nowland Boulevard or Viking Boulevard, the establishment of pedestrian bicycle, you know, facility parallel to that, or those kinds of things.
It says right here, the city has initiated work on a street maintenance plan to identify maintenance and capacity issues within existing street systems, allowing for long-term improvement plans to be prepared. We've been doing this for years. We didn't even know it. And there's an assessment policy as part of this. Equitable means of funding planned improvements to benefiting properties. Cities should also continue to require that new development pay all costs related to construction of new streets or upgrades of existing streets needed to serve these projects. Now, that came up recently, where the developers are saying that's too expensive. That's why the sod farm never developed, because they didn't want to pay that.
Right.
They said, you're gonna benefit by me putting in all these houses, you pay for the street improvement. That's why the development south of me that should have blacktopped all the way out to 5 didn't, because they didn't adhere to their comprehensive plan. Now, the developers will tell you that nobody's gonna come and build in your city. Eventually they will, when everything else fills up around us. But if we give it away, then we're gonna get stuck paying for those costs. So, do we wanna keep that in our plans? And that's when we're going through line by line, this is what we should be doing, so, you know, it's, what time is it?
9:30.
9:30 now. If there's any other highlights we have, and then I think what we should do is, as a council, since 2 members aren't here tonight anyway, go back through this to see if there's anything else. Yes, I want to keep this, I want to change that. And what I would ask the council to direct Planner Stockman to do is to come through with any markups that you want to see on this
Okay.
as recommendations to us. And then highlight that and get that sent out to us. Here's your recommendations. And then it behooves the council to come up with I want to keep this, I want to reorganize it to accentuate, I want to bold this, I want to change this according to what the planner said, I want to add or subtract. And that way we don't feel like we got it all done tonight.
And then why don't we include that land use plan again for next time?
Yes. And I think it's legitimate to say it's not contiguous, and to say it otherwise would open us up to a lot of unplanned development.
Right, I mean, it's an island, you know, after we changed or settled on that other area. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an island of industrial that doesn't touch commercial or.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, were you saying, just prior to this, that if an area gets developed, that it's, the developer has to,
Yeah, it's under the assessment policy on
Yeah.
page 10.
so, it's up to the developer to put in the streets in a
Right.
development?
And the understanding here is that pay all costs related to construction of new streets or upgrades to existing streets needed to serve these projects. The policy has been, if you're putting in, development went south of me, and that has to be blacktops. You put in a new development, you have to blacktop. the understanding is you blacktop out all the way to the blacktop. So you don't go from blacktop to gravel to blacktop. Now, the town board didn't always enforce that because sometimes it got expensive. And the developer didn't want to pay it. Now, the city's left with this gravel chunk that we have to go out and grade and maintain as a gravel piece. And you've got blacktop to blacktop, so it's a very sharp edge when you're grading. It would have been much more sense to take that extra couple 100 feet and blacktop the whole thing. And so historically what we've said, and the sod farms are an example, they figured it'd be about $1 million to blacktop all of Tiger and 211th to go from county blacktop to county blacktop, plus all the blacktop they would need in the development that they were planning to do. And they didn't want to spend $1 million on roads. The problem is if they don't, then we do. And so,
Understood.
so you never have as much leverage as you do when somebody's got all this money pouring into their development. Because once they're done and gone, then the city has to either keep maintaining gravel, and the pressure is on when you have your brand new housing development with blacktop, and you have to go on a gravel road to get there. So that's been the policy, and here's where it comes from. Our superior document guides our ordinances and our zoning and our policies.
Mr. Mayor?
Planner Stockman.
So it is challenging though, because with the 5 acre lot size or average, you know, it's hard to make money sometimes, you know, on a per lot basis.
And that's why developers are gonna come in and say you have smaller lots, so I can get twice as many homes in there and I can spread that cost out.
Right. So, I mean, and that's.
It's gonna be the ongoing conflict.
Right, and in that in that whole thought is why, you know, what you wanna call clustering or, you know, makes a lot of sense, where you have the same number of
Call it anything but clustering, but
home
yes,
sites.
the creative development that preserves open space while allowing neighborhoods to be built.
Right.
It makes it more economically feasible for the developer.
Right,
And the compromise is the residents still get the open viewscapes.
right,
Or
it's not as, yeah,
you come in with, what's the family up here by the lake that's talking about potentially developing?
oh, Moritz?
No, the one up by Bear Lake,
Oh, there, Gustafson, yeah,
Gustafson.
uh-huh,
You have a family that comes in there and says, you know what? We want to put in trails, we want blacktop roads, we want large lots. I mean, they wanted larger lots than we even did a concept plan on. They said, well, bigger lots than that. We'll give you a park, we'll give you trails, and we'll pave the roads.
right,
If you could find more people like that, when
right,
your city develops, people will be less concerned. The traditional developers are coming in saying, I want the smallest lots possible so I can get the most in, get my money and run. Gustafsons are ideal
exactly,
developers. And I think that the Sundells, from an industrial, commercial side, could be.
absolutely,
And I think subsequent to our last conversation, I got a phone call from Mr. Moritz, and he's got some ideas that are fabulous.
awesome,
You know, community barns and amphitheaters and band shells and ball fields and
that's awesome. City center would be, yeah, in this area, would be great.
so I think if we don't just cave in to the first person that comes along and pressures us to do what's cheap and partner with people that have a vision. One of the things when we was with the open house at the Sundells, at the TEMG trucking firm over here, the new place on 201st. I was asking them where they got their inspiration for the barnwood and the type of building they have and what their vision would be, because they want to do another building just like that one on the corner.
Right,
And they would like to see more commercial buildings like that on our main street. And their vision comes from ski resorts out west.
oh,
Big Sky and Aspen and various ski towns out west. where you go in and they said they look classy. Why can't you look classy and why do you have to just throw up the cheapest thing possible? Why don't we do something? And so they invested their own money and said, here's what we'd like to see. And I think architecturally, we need to keep that in mind. Do we have to just count out anybody who shows up with $1, or do we say, we want our town to look nice in the long run? We'll get the right people in here, we'll get that. And Gustafson's, I think, are indicative of that. Sundell's are indicative of that, potentially Moritz.
Absolutely.
And so I think we just make sure we partner with the right people. And that goes back to this, because as we saw with the sod farms, that was township days. They had the proposal, they've got the thing all platted out. They just won't do it if they have to build the roads.
Right.
And nobody across the street from them cares. They like the sod fields.
Right. But, you know, some of that architectural stuff too, or the building standards, is an ordinance thing, which could be upgraded. Or if you designate like a central business district or city center, if you want to call it that, where, you know, your standards are a little higher than, say, your industrial park.
Yeah, and I was talking to some previous about that. My brother-in-law, when he lived in Connecticut, I expected to go out there and see a megalopolis of just businesses and industry everywhere. And his town was, they had those ordinances. And quite frankly, they had a certain amount of screening on the main highway, but within that, their ordinances were so strict, you could hardly tell a McDonald's from a gas station, from a bank, from a superette.
Right.
You know, but they had their signs on them.
They are hard to
I
find
didn't go into the
sometimes.
gas station and
Yeah.
order a hamburger. So I knew the difference, but as you go out east, there's a lot of that where they have done that.
Right, a lot of vegetation, the lower sign, the monument type sign,
Yep.
right?
And so I do think that as we go through this portion of the work, the comp plan, we should consider recommending the ordinances in a city center. Here's the architectural imagery we're looking for.
Right,
And it was reinforced when Sundell said that. They're investing in now then. You know, one of them lives here, the other one wanted to. And they're saying that main artery is one that can make a difference. Got a really nice anchor down at the end with Elk River.
right. And you have pedestrian friendly is a big thing. And, yeah, just the appearance and how everything is inviting.
I think if we had a nice park as part of that development and pedestrian friendly to the commercial businesses near there.
Right.
So I do think that whether that is generally stated in our comp plan and specifically stated in our ordinances, I think we need to make that happen before the development gets ahead of us.
Right, and that comes in, a lot of that comes in with this policy section, you know, what are our goals and policies? So we'll review that carefully again. And I know some of that's in there, but, okay. Well, any other thoughts for tonight?
A couple of notes that I had on page 9. Well, actually, it's on page 10 here, community facilities. Government buildings. The city will need to monitor the adequacy of current office and meeting facilities, storage and other spatial needs as development within the community continues over time and plan for expansion of existing buildings or construction of new facilities as part of a capital improvement plan. Again, it's been in here for a long time. This is when we were talking about having a clerk treasurer that's partnering rather than just administrating. I would like somebody within our staff to look through this and say, how are we doing this? It's here, it's in the comp plan, but we really don't have a plan for that. Now, the town board did at one point lay out downtown here and the senior center and a rec center and
Right,
had some of that concept. We need a concept plan for our facilities and our government-owned property, or city-owned property. Here's the comp plan portion of it. And where's the ordinance and the tactical portion of it? Administration. Public safety, city council will need to continue to evaluate level of police and fire protection. I think we do that pretty well. The issue is especially significant as it relates to commercial and industrial businesses, which may have unique demands for issues of public safety. It's one of the things that keep coming up when people say we need more and more business for the tax revenue. This is another thing, when you get more and more business, we have an obligation to take a look at what it means for our public safety. You know, is our current contract with the sheriff sufficient for the number of industrial and commercial buildings we have here? Is our fire coverage sufficient for the types of buildings we have here? So part of the obligation of the council is to take this and say, where's the action item on this, to say on an annual basis or a whatever it is, biannual basis, there's a specific review. So new councils come in here and say, is our police and fire protection still sufficient for the size city that we are? And because we never read this document, we don't think that, yeah, we haven't been a long time since we evaluated, is our contract with the sheriff good enough? We evaluated, did it go up much? But is our coverage sufficient for, if we've got 3 new restaurants and they all serve alcohol, maybe our police protection, our fire protection isn't enough. So we should be evaluating that. So that should come out as an action item for review on the council at least annually. And certainly as the councils turn over, that should come up. The next one was administration. I had noted continued development creates demands for additional office and maintenance personnel to carry out the function of city government. Primary issue related to adding staff is the cost of salaries and benefits. To the extent possible, the city should adopt policies and mechanisms to pass through costs for services to benefiting users. A fundamental user pay policy will be critical to the future of maintaining cost-effective government. Now that this is something that has come up repeatedly with the last council. We never went back here to the comp plan that says the reason we have the user pay policy is that was decided as comp plan. If we want to change that, we should alter our comp plan and change our ordinances. But the reason we're doing the way we're structured is because of this. The other portion, I see this as an A and B. As we develop, it's going to create demands for additional office and maintenance personnel. So as we talk about what are our staffing needs in public works, in our what's currently contracted services, and in the administrative side of things, our plan, we should have an action register that comes out of this plan that says how often, annually, biannually, are we reviewing this to say, do we have the right structure in place for the development we have? We're doing it piecemeal, you know, is Ellen and a clerk treasurer, are they able to keep up with the demands? Are we structured properly with the contract help? But I think it should be more formal. I think there should be a workshop at least every new council that addresses these things specifically. And so what I'm looking for in a clerk treasurer, administrative help here with the city, is we go through this and say, okay, what are the actions item out of this? So that we know we're formally reviewing what you're doing and is our current staffing sufficient? What's Joe doing? Is our current staffing sufficient? Rather than piecemeal saying, I need a little more help here, Joe needs a little more help there. Let's formally review that and say, we need it. We reviewed it because that's our responsibility as part of our comp plan. Yes.
So I'm kind of thinking as you're going through this, is the new administrators, city clerk, treasurer, whatever, would it be beneficial for them to go over this regularly?
Absolutely.
And find out, you know, what needs to be on the agendas based on the comp plan?
Corey and I used to have this, I'll call it discussion on a regular basis, because when I would talk about things on the agenda or issues that had boiled to the surface, and I'd say, how does that fit in our road plan? You're making a recommendation, we have a road study. How does that fit our park plan? How does that fit our comprehensive plan? Because I would always try and drive it back to, don't just give me something piecemeal, go back to the plan, because that's the hammer you got. Jeff, our park plan says this. We should be doing this. That's what we said. You know, this should be part of the planning and zoning review because it's park related, and any development has to go back and make sure it's consistent with our comp plan, our park plan, our road plan, and our ordinances. And one day she just got mad at me, says, I've never read those and I'm not going to. It's like, well, then how do you lead us if you don't know what our guiding documents are? So to your point, yes, I think that these should be well known by staff, because this is what we base things on. When we had our little discussion, when your interview, and you had questioned on how the council could vote against the planning and zoning when they voted 6-0 to approve something, my frustration was this very thing. They ignored our comp plan and they ignored our ordinances and said, we feel like doing this. He wants to sell, he wants to buy, let's just do it. And we said, hold it. You don't even have your ordinance books in front of you. And you've never read the comp plan. You can't do that. It violates the documents by which we base our decisions. And they said, we feel like doing it. So they voted 6-0. And the reason I particularly voted against it wasn't to just counter them, it was because they didn't take into account this, and if we throw this out, now we got chaos. Now we're just subjectively saying, he wants that, she wants that, let's just do it. And that's why I'm always a stickler saying, if you give in, like Mr. Peterson tonight, I have no idea why we picked no galvanized on the roof. But if we let him do it once, everybody who knows about that will come back and say, you gave him precedent, I want the same thing. And it's been thrown in our face a lot. And so when that happened, I wasn't trying to just buck the system, but I felt at that point, emotionally, the 6 of them just said the easiest way out of this, it was a late meeting, it was, let's be done with it. They made a wrong decision. And it wasn't that I was trying to fight them on it, it was, you didn't base it. If you would have come back and said our comp plan and our ordinances say that's perfectly all right, I'd have no argument. I personally don't like it, but that's what the city has agreed on. These are what guide us. The fact that they just ignored it completely was upsetting to me. And that's why I couldn't vote with them on that. And that was the part you didn't know, so it looked like, well,
That was my first council meeting
yeah.
ever.
And so that's where, and you've heard me say it times before, you don't even, I understand you like things online, then have a tablet so you can read your ordinances here. But when you're in planning and zoning, you should be saying the ordinance says, zoning regulations require, and oh, by the way, the comp plan says right here. And when you can go back to the documents, it makes Liz finding of facts. It makes it a no-brainer for the council. The finding of facts quote the comp plan, the ordinances, and the zoning regulations, and they meet them all. That's why she's so careful when she goes through variances. Variance requires this, this, and this, they meet them, or they don't. And in the case of Mr. Clemmer, he didn't. So technically, our hands were tied. We couldn't legitimately do that without opening up a Pandora's box for the rest of the city.
Right.
That's why the easy way out over on 47 is to say anybody who touches Mr. Raisler's land, they can have the same rules as Mr. Raisler. Then how do you stop anybody else that wants it? That snowball starts rolling down the hill, and pretty soon this comp plan is no effect, because what we just said here, we just violated with one decision. So you go back and, I'm a stickler for rules, because if we agree this is our guiding document, we need to stick to it. And when planning and zoning starts quoting me comp plan and ordinances, I'm a happy man. Well, as happy as I get.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that having understanding how it applies to the business of the city for a nice generic term is certainly of value, so.
Right, I mean, you have this document for 10 years. I mean, that's a long time. You can change a lot in 10 years.
Well, you know, the next item here, development regulations. Now then must review its zoning and subdivision ordinances regularly to ensure they adequately regulate land uses and land development consistent with community goals. As development occurs and a range of land uses within the community expands, the zoning ordinance in particular must be updated to provide necessary definitions, administrative procedures, current performance standards, and distinct zoning districts consistent with existing land uses and land use plans. So how would a administrative leader handle that? They'd say there's a regulation that you must review zoning and subdivision ordinance regularly. How are you gonna do that? Through planning and zoning? Is this gonna be something we put the planner on a project basis for? Are we gonna have a workshop? This is typically what cities would use workshops for, by the way. These long-range things. You take a segment of this and say, the planner would say, based on our development, we need to address some of these zoning regulations. Or, you know, with the pressure, if Moritz decides, you know, if we decide Moritz's land, we've decided, Moritz's land is now commercial industrial along the highway there. We need to review our zoning to make sure if we want a different standard there from somewhere else in the city, or in the 2-acre developments over there, if the zoning ordinance need to be adjusted, this would be a great time for a workshop to say, based on the comprehensive plan, we have more development coming in and we need to review our development regulations.
Right.
And that becomes a workshop.
And two good examples are, well, the one tonight with the material requirement, but another thing that's come up this year is the natural landscaping. You know, it's everywhere, but we had somebody challenge the ordinance that said your grass has to be cut to 6 inches high or whatever, 6 or 8 inches high. Well, the intent is really for manicured lawns, not 5 acres of natural prairie, you know. So clarifying things like that too.
And so the structure that I would hope that you, along with the new administrative person would be, is those are types of things we'd want to start working with staff to say, what needs to come to a workshop level? And so, you know, on a quarterly basis, you take a section of this and go through it and say, well, you see something like this coming up, say, the grass issue, yeah, manicured neighborhoods versus 5-acre parcels, we need distinctions. Commercial versus retail versus industrial, we need distinctions. Yes.
You're talking about workshops. And then earlier tonight, you talked about needing to go over this ahead of the meeting, all the regular meeting things. So are you talking about having a workshop for the council meeting and then having another workshop for the other things too? Or is this like a workshop?
What I would
for-
envision is probably, I'm guessing maybe quarterly. We have a workshop that specifically talks about whether it's comprehensive plan issues, direction that we want to have staff looking
City
into.
Development workshop type thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's more general guidance. I think, and while we're on it, I think once a quarter, we ought to sit down with staff as a council and staff and have general reviews of how things are going with the city. Are we meeting our goals? First of all, do we communicate goals? And second of all, are we meeting them? And thirdly, what can we do about that?
Can that be part of this workshop, with the city development workshop?
Could be. You know, because I think that one should be pretty quick if we've communicated our goals effectively, we've identified what they are, and we've communicated them, it should be pretty easy with staff to sit down and say, understood.
What staff are you referring to?
I'm saying office staff, it'd be you, Joe, Liz, Andy, Shane, as appropriate. what are we trying to accomplish in now then, and are we doing a good job at it? And that comes right down to, you know, what are we trying to do as a public works department? We all agree Joe's doing a great job in these areas, be specific. What areas do we need to improve on?
What
So
issues?
so if we're doing that, it doesn't boil over sometime later. If
Right.
somebody thinks you're doing a great job here, I should tell you. If somebody thinks something needs to be improved, I should tell you. It shouldn't be a surprise later. And if we're doing that, we're communicating more effectively, which, by the way, is the next one on the list, is communication. You know, see, that's why this is an important guiding document. We go back and say we're supposed to communicate, well, we're not doing it.
All right.
So if you want to mark up what you see on this, if the council, and if, Ellen, if you would send to Mary and Linda as well, that they should take this first section that we have tonight and mark up any changes, accentuate what they think is most important, what should be either put first or bolded, and anything they think needs changing or revision, and then we'll bring this up again. And Liz, if you'll do the same thing with recommendations. I think it's pretty evident that the city, through their voting, has said we want to keep as close to this as possible. But I think there's wonderful things, like I said, if you see my flags here, there's all kinds of things that are important that we're not really paying attention to. These flags all to me are action items that we as a council and staff should be working on.
Sounds good.
Is that right? You're packed up, but we have some things go through quickly here. Because we got to G, but we have to go back to H, I, J, K.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
I just had some questions about the dust control plan, and I sent an email to Joe, but he was obviously busy today. I think at this time, knowing that we're not going to be doing dust control and graveling within the next month, I would make a motion to table resolution 2019-13.
Motion, do I hear a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Bryant.
I just wanted to have a discussion with the council regarding resolution 2019-15. I just would like to make a motion to approve resolution 2019-15, but with the following change, that the funds be put into the building capital improvement fund.
I'll second that. And Ellen, for your edification here, we typically have taken those types of funds, and if they come from Ramsey Lions, they generally designate where they'd like to see them go. The reason we have typically done to the fire department in the past, because there was a request to require at least 10%. The city could put a 10% requirement on gambling funds in the city. And if we require it, it goes to emergency services. We don't require it, and therefore we can use it wherever.
I thought this was required, this
No.
Elk River Youth thing.
No,
Because when I
that's-
called
that's-
her about it, she said.
We aren't requiring the 10%. They require that, we require that they give back to the city if they're gonna have gambling here. But we don't have specifically an ordinance that says they have to give 10%. That is there.
I didn't know where it was supposed to go, so I called Bootleggers, and this Elk River Youth Hockey person happened to be there, and I talked to her on the phone, and she said, I said, I've seen that it's gone to the fire department, is that where you'd like it to go? And she said, I don't care, we just have to give it, whatever,
Yeah,
you know.
they're required to give it by them. We don't
By
have an ordinance.
Bootleggers?
No, by their charter.
Oh, okay.
The
They're required.
Hockey Association requires
Oh, I
it.
see, okay.
I think it's actually the state requires that they give back. But at one point, one of the council members was recommending that we actually set up a policy or an ordinance that requires all charitable gambling to give at least 10% to us. And if we do that by state statute, it goes to emergency services. But in this case, it's not required, so Councilmember Bryan is suggesting go into the general building fund, and being that we are looking at putting in $4,600 worth of plumbing into the building,
This building?
no, the office building.
To
Get
the
rid of the
smelly,
stink.
smelly water.
Okay.
It seems appropriate to take that 4,200 and apply it towards that. So all those in favor of passing resolution 2019-15 with the clarification the money would go into the building fund rather than the fire equipment fund? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item GJ.
Jeez. Okay, yeah, Mr. Mayor.
It's getting late. Resolution 2019-16, Councilmember Bryan.
No, originally we talked about approving the contract for what's now known as the North Metro Animal Control. I'm just, now that we've said that we need to take a closer look, and that I've been taking a closer look at it, I just have some questions in general when we talk about the city having to add on additional cost regarding deceased animals and other areas. I'm just wondering is this typical? Is it standard? Is this just a standard agreement that's put together? I mean, not that, I'm not saying, do we have other options? Have there been other companies that have done this in the past? And now that we're looking at it further, I'm having more questions and I'm not sure where we would go with them.
You know, I had some questions too, on the contracted price. When animals are unclaimed, city shall pay contractor for services rendered in this agreement, $15 per day for 5 days, then what? Do they euthanize? Do they try and find another home? Veterinary expenses, the city's responsible for up to $300 per animal if they do veterinary services. What kind of veterinary services are we doing? Nobody's claiming these animals, yet we're doing veterinary services up to $300.
Well, if they get them in, like if they're injured or something,
Yeah, it would be nice to have somebody explain it to us, because right now we're signing a contract. The bigger one to me was 6, deceased animals. Contractor shall accept deceased companion animals, which are dogs and cats by definition here, for identification and holding pending claim by owner. If no owner comes forward within 5 business days, the deceased animal will be cremated at a facility and cost will be reimbursed by the city.
So if you find a deceased animal on the road.
That's
that
a dog
may
or a
look
cat.
Like it's domesticated, no one claims it, and they cremate it, we pay for it.
And euthanasia, when necessary, shall not exceed $75. When is it necessary?
well, if they're gravely injured though, I think that'd be something pretty critical that you'd want to allow.
Right, but because I don't know any of that,
Yeah.
it's just,
It's kind of vague.
I don't know the history of it, it's one of those things where you can blindly sign it and you can get taken to the cleaners.
Yeah.
I don't know, and again, because our history has not been, I've got one person holding down everything in the office right now.
Right.
And I say, oh, by the way, Ellen, could you make sure that they don't find animals and charge us for that? How are we tracking what they're doing? I don't know what the history's been, I don't know how often. I would like to know from them, statistically, how often the city's been paying for unclaimed animals or deceased animals that they're cremated or euthanized,
Right.
To date, since
Yeah.
I've been doing bills, we've never paid Dover Kennels anything
Okay.
that I know of. That's why. when I
And
saw
is this the same contract basically they had before, do you know?
I don't know. We are currently, the last agreement was made to go back to the one that we're currently
Okay,
under.
so what I would move that we table this until we can get some of those questions answered. Maybe we have
Mark Anderson.
Mark Anderson from whatever they're now called.
what is that?
And if you could find the previous contract and send that out to us.
I can't remember what it is.
So I move that Ellen send out the previous contract with Dover Kennel and that we get Mark Anderson, North Metro Animal Control, to come and answer our questions.
I'll second that.
The March meeting?
Yes. And maybe what, you know, since we have some specific ones on contract price and, you know, 4A, B, and 6 and 7, we could start with those. How often is it, in his experience, has this happened in other states? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. KK,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
as far as having, our auditor update our 2019 capital plan, I guess I just have some general questions.
I have specific questions.
Okay. About what we would be needing in one, and I guess how this would be laid out.
Let me say my specific question, because I can't vote on this tonight because of this. I don't understand it.
Understand the plan?
The numbers. I've got a number here that says capital levies. R&B equipment, $50,000, fire equipment, $25,000, road and bridge improvement, $1 million. I don't know if this is a typo or if this is taking into monies the city's gonna put aside here. I've got questions over here on the footnoting on fire engine certificate. It says footnote number 1, final pay in 2022, and yet the sheet you gave us here says something different than that.
These are bonds, though,
Right,
not CDs.
no, where's the summary here? Take a look at your bond here.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay, so
don't
this
pay
is,
attention to that.
this fire engine certificate says 2020, and 1 says final payment in 2022. Fire engine says 2023. F and F on grader certificate and building bond says final payment in 2021. The one does say 2021, the other one says 2022. So,
All I know is that that bottom section of that sheet, like I said, needs to be redone, and I haven't done anything to that
Right.
since Cory left.
so to my point is I would like to see this document and this document be consistent. Because I don't believe that these two are actually paid off in the same year, but maybe they are. But it's never been reported to us that way. And secondly, this I gotta believe is a typo. It may be that went up to $100,000, but didn't go up to $1 million. And then additional inputs. 2018, we have no transfers. And the numbers he has on this reserves here, payout here, don't match these numbers here.
Maybe that's why it needs to be updated. I don't know, this is an old one, and he hasn't done any updating. That's
Okay.
why he said it needed to be updated, and he's done the updating traditionally. So I don't know.
And he's doing that at no charge? Typically, the capital improvement plan is done at no charge.
Right. He said that he can't do it without your direction, or without your approval, but he's done it before. I don't know what the process is to do it, but.
Well, if he's doing it at no charge, and, because right now these numbers don't make sense to me, if he wants to give us an updated projection at no charge, I don't have a problem with that. But as this reads, I can't follow it compared to this document, which he's aware of, and the numbers on this aren't consistent within its own self, and they're not consistent with this document.
Would you like me to ask him to come to the next council meeting too?
Sure. or if he's around town, if he wants me to explain what my confusion is, and maybe he can straighten me out and give us a document that we can follow.
Is it, Mr. Mayor?
Brian?
I mean, if it's something that is done for no charge, I think, you know, there's probably value in updating it, but then it's certainly going to need some explanation. At least I'm understanding, because I'm confused as well as far as what all the numbers mean and how it relates to everything else.
I think we should turn it over to Joel, because he just had a 2-hour session on financials. I think you should be able to put that into practice now. That was about as exciting as tonight, wasn't it?
So let me understand what the decision is here. It's basically to allow him, you haven't made the decision yet, but to allow him to update it, but then he needs to come to the meeting to,
What I would
explain
say
it.
is, update it, send it out to the council
With an explanation.
with, you know, and so we can look at it and then ask our questions. And then maybe what we can do is Councilmember Brian and I can sit down with Mike over lunch, you know, at lunchtime, 1 hour,
Okay.
and try and make some sense out of it. If we can make sense out of it, then we bring it back to the council in March.
Okay, so it's not
He's free to update this.
so the resolution is passed, can be passed. It's all he's asking for is permission
Yeah.
to update.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the understanding is he's doing it at no charge at this point.
Right.
But then we need to be able to understand it, and I would like to see it be consistent with our document I keep misplacing,
The treasurer's report,
treasurer's report.
which we probably have to update too.
Whether our adjusted bank total is unavailable and unreconciled.
That's because AAM hasn't, we have to close out CTAS for the.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
Need a motion
Hang
on
on,
that one.
yep, exactly.
so I'll make a motion
To approve,
to approve resolution 2019-20, understanding there's no charge, and that copies of the update will be sent out. And then, if necessary, a subsequent meeting will take place between Councilmember Bryan, myself, and Mr. Mofo,
prior to the
prior to the March meeting.
March meeting. Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan,
motion to adjourn.
meeting is adjourned. You want to sign that? Well, that was